it's not very complicated.
Does this automatically
No,
turn on, or
no,
we
you
just
have to.
press it?
Yeah, you have to press it. And then when you do that, this little light comes on here.
Good to know.
Which, if you're here, you can't see it, but you can see this one. So whatever. That's kind of a crash course.
We have something special for you today, Bill.
Okay. Okay, cool.
I figured it out.
No, I appreciate the help.
Yeah, but like during the presentation, hit this and
Commissioner
you'll see
Tina?
the presentation.
Hi, Tina. Nice to meet you.
No?
No, nice to meet you.
I'm with the opposite end, so we'll have to find some other time to wrap it up.
Yeah, would love to.
I won't be able to chat.
Great to meet you, Bill. I can press this button and see the presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's yeah, that shows like some computer screen. So right now it's showing Zoom, but it'll show the presentation. So then you don't have to do this. But then sometimes I find when I'm on this screen, it's faster if there's just like a quick thing. I'll just turn around and look there instead of. So I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, you found it. Thank you. Ooh, I brought one. It's a year more than me.
Yeah, not super long.
I've never been a commissioner, so we can try, but might not.
And then I'll just ask, and it'll just go
Yeah,
down
we
the
can
line.
just go down the line, right? And then Amber from there, Diana, what are you doing?
And yeah, and Alex at the last meeting was doing something in here, and I learned that you can see the staff reports and stuff in here. I didn't actually have any idea that you could do that. And then you say documents.
Oh,
Yeah,
see.
right, and you can do that. Like that. I learned that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Or whenever that was.
Oh, this is cool.
Yeah. So I just looked over and he's looking at like a PDF on there. Who? How did that? You? Me? You were doing something here. I was like, what the heck is going on? And then I discovered this whole other
That's right.
thing
The other,
because I had only looked at this
it's the
screen
other
before.
dimension.
Yeah. What's this?
Yeah.
People that had them in the previous rows, but I didn't see
Nice
them.
to meet you, Tina.
Okay.
That's a good thing for me to leak about myself.
A good thing. What?
A good thing to leak about myself.
Oh,
Oh,
right.
there's
Right.
no
Right,
video, sorry.
let's see,
I
alright.
forgot to say that.
I love
that-
public service.
All that,
You know.
all that charity work you do at the orphanage and stuff.
Yes, I just rescued 3 orphans from a tree this week.
Wow.
Really?
So impressive.
Yeah.
This microphone is
Good? Okay, great. Okay, at 7:01 p.m., we will call to order our meeting of the Environmental Planning Commission, meeting of March 19th, 2025. For those joining us in person, please note that due to our hybrid environment, audio and video presentations can no longer be shared from the lectern. Requests to show an audio or video presentation during a meeting should be directed to epc@mountainview.gov by 4:30 p.m. on the meeting date. Additionally, due to our hybrid environment, we will no longer have speakers line up to speak on an item. Anyone wishing to address the EPC in person must complete a yellow speaker card. Please indicate the name you would like to be called by when, it is your turn to speak, and the item number on which you wish to speak. Please complete one yellow speaker card for each item on which you wish to speak, and then turn them in to the EPC clerk as soon as possible, but no later than the call for public comment on the item you are speaking on. Instructions for addressing the commission virtually may be found on the posted agenda. Now I will ask the EPC clerk to proceed with roll call.
We'll do a verbal roll call. Commissioner Gutierrez, Chair, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I'm here.
Vice Chair Nunez.
Here.
Commissioner Pham.
Here.
Commissioner Cranston.
Here.
Commissioner Yin.
Here.
Commissioner Donahue.
Here.
All commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Dempsey. Thank you.
Awesome. And I heard you say Commissioner Pham. So having heard that, and before we move on to today's agenda, let's welcome our new Commissioner, Tina Pham, to the EPC. Welcome, Tina. Would you like to give a couple words, maybe a speech, impromptu, go for it if you like.
Just happy to be here with everyone and, have a great evening, I hope.
Thank you, Tina. Appreciate it. I think at this point we're moving on to the minutes approval, 3.1 Environmental Planning Commission meeting minutes of August 21st, 2024. Do we have any EPC discussion on those minutes? Any public comment to those minutes? Do we have anyone on video?
No one at this time.
Okay, great. So then, in this case, I need help with a motion to approve the minutes. Okay.
I move the approval of the minutes. The 3 minutes have been provided as presented.
Okay. Now here I have a note, and I'll just call this out just because it's on my sheet. It says here, a motion to approve the minutes should include reading the following item in blue. Approve the Environmental Planning Commission minutes of August 21st, 2024, with changes as stated by...
No one.
Why do we have that? If there are no changes then to the minutes, we'll just approve them as presented.
So moved. Okay.
Great. So on a motion by Commissioner Cranston and seconded by Commissioner Yin, let's have a vote.
Excuse me, Chair.
Sure.
Good evening, Commissioners. Community Development Director Christian Murdoch. We seem to be having some technical issues with the live stream for those participating remotely. And so I would ask if it pleases the chair to just take a brief recess to allow us to troubleshoot that so that we can maximize public participation.
Sure. Having said that and understood that being the case, then we will pause on the vote for now. And then once you're all ready, please let us know and we'll come back. Any guesstimate in time?
Not sure right now, hopefully just a few minutes.
Sounds good. So for now, we will take a recess for...
Let's start with 5 minutes.
5
please.
minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Test.
Welcome, everyone. The time is 7:08 p.m. and we are back at session. We were in the middle to approve the motion to approve the minutes of August 21st, 2024, moved by Commissioner Cranston, seconded by Commissioner Yen. Madam Clerk.
We can do a roll call vote. Chair Gutierrez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Nunes.
Yes.
Commissioner Donahue.
Yes.
Commissioner Pham. Commissioner Yin.
Aye.
Commissioner Cranston.
Aye.
5 commissioners, yay. 1 commissioner abstains, and Commissioner Dempsey is absent. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move forward to 3.2, moving for the Environmental Planning Commission meeting minutes of September 18th, 2024. Any EP discussion on these? No, the first one was for August 21st, 2024. We have 3 of them. Typically, I've seen this done all in one swoop, but in this case, it looks like they divided it up into 3-1, 3-2, 3-3. So I'll just roll with it. If we have no EP discussion, then any public comments, either here in person or online? Madam Clerk?
No one at this time?
Great.
My motion was to actually approve all 3. Is that invalid, Ms. Attorney?
If the motion was for all 3, then, and the vote's the same, and with the same abstention, I think that carries.
Okay, so can we have the language be checked just to make sure that we covered all 3? Because I thought I had it only read for the first 8. And if that's the case, that's my mistake.
On the agenda, it was for all 3 minutes.
Great, so then we'll move forward with that, and we'll just skip over 3-2, 3-3, since it's already encompassed within 3-1, and then the motion provided by Commissioner Cranston, seconded by Commissioner Yan. We'll go with oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the EPC on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the Commission from acting on non-agenda items. If anyone in attendance would like to provide comments on non-agenda items, please fill out a yellow speaker card and provide it to the EPC clerk. If anyone on Zoom would like to provide comment on non-agenda items, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. Clerk, do we have any comments?
No one at this time.
Right. Having said that, let's move on to our study session, item 5.1, Moffett Boulevard Precise Plan Land Use Alternatives. We'll first have a staff presentation, then public comment. At the closure of public comment, the Commission will then discuss the item, including any questions. Let's begin with a staff presentation from Senior Planner Aki Snelling and Advanced Planning Manager Eric Anderson.
Good evening, Chair Gutierrez and members of the Commission. My name is Aki Snelling, Senior Planner and Project Planner for the Moffett Boulevard Precise Plan Project. And I'm also joined here by Amber Blazinski, who's our Assistant Community Development Director, and also by Eric Anderson, who is joined by us by Zoom. The Moffett Boulevard Precise Plan will be a new precise plan that will serve as the zoning regulations for the area shown here. Similar to other precise plans in the city, it will include development and streetscape standards for the precise plan area and will implement guidance from the general plan, the housing element, and also the latest council work plan. The most recent council direction on this project was on November 19th of last year, when the council provided direction on the visioning framework and potential strategies for the Moffett Boulevard area. They also designated 4 adjacent neighborhoods as future study areas, which are shown as tan on the maps before you. For these future study areas, new development standards would be limited and no change in allowed land uses or densities would occur at this time. The project team did extensive community outreach, Since the last year's EPC and City Council study sessions, including the March 3rd community outreach meeting on the land use alternatives and streetscape improvement concepts, which we'll talk about tonight. Approximately 85 people participated in group discussions at that community workshop on land use alternatives and a live survey to rank streetscape improvement concepts. A survey covering similar topics is available and will remain open and available until the beginning of April. City staff and consultants have also held a pop-up event at the Mountain View Farmers Market and also visited businesses along Moffett to announce the March 3rd workshop. As a reminder, the city held its first community workshop in August of last year, and at that time, we heard from participants who had talked about their vision for the Moffett Boulevard area. At the previous study session, 5 vision themes and potential strategies were presented to the EPC. City Council provided direction to update them as shown on these slides. Vision Theme 1 is a unique identity and community for residents, businesses, workers, and visitors. Vision Theme 2 is a thriving hub of economic activity and uses for the neighborhood and surrounding areas. And Vision Theme 3 is a revitalized neighborhood that embraces a range of housing, business, and community amenities and uses for the neighborhood and surrounding areas. This highlighted language was modified based on EPC and Council's input last year. Vision Theme 4 is an accessible, pedestrian, and bicycle-friendly multimodal corridor. Vision Theme 5 is a unique place with engaging and unique activities, events, and opportunities. And these were changes based on Council and EP's input as well that are highlighted. The first question for EPC consideration tonight is about the land use alternatives. As a result of previous EPC, Council, and community input, 3 land use alternatives are proposed. 1, a medium intensity mixed use alternative. 2, a higher intensity mixed use alternative. And 3, a focused mixed use alternative. These alternatives are not meant to represent the only possible approach for land uses, character, heights, and densities. They are intended to offer various ways of looking at the corridor that can be mixed and matched to settle on the preferred alternative. Alternative A is a medium intensity mixed use alternative, applying housing density per the city's adopted housing ordinance, housing element, and encouraging but not requiring ground floor non-residential uses, with housing density up to approximately 75 dwelling units per acre and maximum building heights of 4 to 5 stories. Alternative B is a higher intensity mixed use alternative. But this plan would require ground floor non-residential uses along Moffett Boulevard with housing density of up to approximately 100 dwelling units per acre and maximum building heights of 5 to 7 stories. Alternative C is a focused mixed-use alternative that includes 2 nodes for commercial activity along Moffett Boulevard at Central Expressway near the Transit Center and between Central Avenue and Cypress Point Drive, where walkable commercial activity is more likely, with housing density of up to 100 units per acre in the commercial nodes, while only 75 units per acre elsewhere. And the maximum building heights in this area would be 4 to 7 stories, with the taller buildings focused in the commercial nodes. Tonight, staff is seeking EPC input with 2 key questions. 1, the first question is, which land use alternative does the EPC recommend as a preferred alternative, and does the EPC recommend any modifications to that alternative? Community input included a wide variety of responses during our workshop, particularly regarding density and maximum building heights. Opinions varied and spanned the range of densities shown. For non-residential uses, some said not enough commercial was being proposed, and also commercial should be required. Participants were also asked for more opportunities for walkability and bikeability, and highlighted parking as an issue, though state law limits our ability to require on-site parking. The process to determine final streetscape design will need further study to consider things such as the right-of-way street width, ability to accommodate near utilities, existing capital projects, a flexible approach to vary along the corridor, traffic modeling and vehicle trips, ability for pedestrian and bicycle continuity, the transit center master plan, and cost and funding. There are 6 options as listed on the next slides for how to use that limited space in the right-of-way. We are seeking EPC and council input on their priorities among these 6 options presented tonight because they cannot all be accommodated in the limited right-of-way along Moffett. So these options include 1, a wider sidewalk with trees and pedestrian amenities. 2 and 3 are buffered or protected bike lanes. Buffered bike lanes are separated from the vehicle lane with markings, while protected bike lanes are separated from the vehicle lane with improvements such as curbs or landscaping. Other options include a landscape boulevard with medians, maintaining the current vehicle roadway capacity with 4 vehicle lanes. If this option is ranked lower, the team will study a road diet for Moffett Boulevard. And then lastly, on-street parking. The second question tonight for EPC is, what are the EPC's priorities for streetscape improvement for Moffett Boulevard based upon this list? This slide shows how attendees at the community workshop ranked these improvements. Attendees felt wider sidewalks with trees and pedestrian amenities was the top priority, followed by bicycle improvements. Parking and maintaining the existing travel lanes were at the bottom. Other comments expressed include the need for improved traffic calming measures, better landscaping and more lighting, improved bicycle facilities, and green spaces. Following tonight's meeting, staff will take your responses to council at next month's tentative April 26th council study session. Based upon council's preferred alternative, the project team will begin the environmental review process and also begin drafting the precise plan. Staff will conduct additional focused outreach and hold additional EPC and council study sessions later this year. So above are the summary of questions that staff would like EPC to provide responses to so that we can carry those forward to City Council. This concludes staff's report. I'd also like to mention that in attendance are also Martin Alkire, who is our consulting planner, Christian Murdoch, our Community Development Director, Ed Arango, who is our Assistant Public Works Director, and also Dan Amsden, who is from our consulting team, MIG.
Thank you. If anyone in attendance would like to provide comments on this item, please fill out a yellow speaker card and provide it to the EPC clerk. If anyone on Zoom would like to provide comments on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. Clerk, Madam Clerk, any takers?
Yes, we do have a hand raised. April Webster. You should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello? Hi, yes, April Webster. I'm a resident. I've lived in the area of Moffett for, I think, 13 years now. I love the area. I've attended both of the outreach meetings, and I just wanted to summarize what I noticed. There is overwhelming support across all community groups and that we were split up into for walkability, bikeability, paseos, green, shade, trees. And while parking was brought up, it was only about 38 out of the 58 attendees who responded to the online survey, or 38 out of 58 didn't like it or weren't interested in it. And similarly, a vast majority weren't happy with 4 lanes of traffic. And so I wanted to make a push tonight for a road diet. The street is underutilized. Recent counts for the Castro Transit Center showed it was continued to be underutilized. And under the FHWA guidelines for warranting a road diet. So I think that would fit a lot of the criteria and how people want to see our neighborhood grow. And it's also come up similarly for the other side of Moffett, for the Moffett Complete Streets plan. So I'd really like the EPC to consider that as one of the options. Thank you so much for letting me share my thoughts.
Madam Clerk, anyone else?
Not at this time.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to EPC questions and discussion. We'll go first with the questions. Excuse me. EPC question number 1. Which land use alternative does the EPC recommend as a preferred land use alternative? Does the EPC recommend any modifications to that alternative? Let's start with that one. Which commissioner would like to start? Thank you, Commissioner Yen. Commissioner Cranston.
I guess question on the alternative C. The removal of not including the highest density on the northeast side or northwest side of Moffett surprised me a little bit. Is there a reason that you chose not to include that in the? Is that because of the mobile home park right behind it? They're larger lots, so I was surprised that those were removed.
I can start with this one, if that's okay. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Cranston. Eric Anderson, Advanced Planning Manager. So the intent of Alternative 3 is really to show an option with nodes of activity. And the nodes of activity were selected based on access to roads that connect to surrounding neighborhoods, as well as adjacency to R3 and other higher density properties. So those were the criteria for the nodes, and of course access to the transit center as well. So that's why the 400 Moffett site wasn't included as a node.
Right, and second question, the section on the east side of Moffett from central to central, I guess, that first block is very narrow. And I was interested in staff's view on, that kind of narrow shape made me think that it would probably be more likely to get a density bonus requests specifically to remove open space because of the limited amount of space in that area. Does staff have any thoughts on that? It's so shallow. It seemed like an area that I questioned whether it might, how well it could support any open space in our normal design guidelines.
That's a great question. So typically in multifamily developments, open area requirements can be satisfied through above grade open space. So it wouldn't be public open space, right? It would be common open space for the development. And so it can be satisfied through a podium open space or through a rooftop open space or through balconies. So it's not necessarily the case that they would need to get a waiver for open space, although depending on the standards that we adopt, it is possible that developers may have an incentive to still request waivers from that standard.
So it sounds like you think it can occur, but it's going to be upper floors, balconies, that kind of thing, not ground floor. Is that fair?
If we continue with the open space standard that the open area definition that we use across other zoning districts, then that would be the case, yes. But I would say it's a little premature to be talking about specific standards right now because we just simply haven't gotten to that point in the process.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Cranston. Commissioner Yen.
Yes, I had one question regarding retail, or not, sorry, it's a two-part question. One is the ground floor non-residential use, I believe it was called. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is? Does it encompass anything, just not residential?
Well, we can receive additional council and EPC direction to help kind of put guide rails on that. Certainly the community's input was support for neighborhood serving commercial. That was really part of the vision for the community. And so that would be the focus if we move forward just based on the language from the vision.
Okay, thank you. And part two of the question was, I noticed in the various alternatives, there's encouraged and then there's required. And I was wondering, you know, after seeing a lot of the projects that have come forward, if a project does utilize the state bonus, if you require it, can they still waive or concede that requirement?
Yes, in our findings, with current, density bonus is currently interpreted by judges and state law language. It is very likely that developers will be able to waive commercial requirements or request incentives or concessions for commercial requirements. So we're going to continue to look into this to see how we can address that opportunity that developers have. One opportunity that I like to focus on is really kind of a shared vision for the community, and really from the community and developers that buy into that shared vision for the community. And I think a strong commercial node can really kind of promote that shared vision, especially if the city has also promised to do public improvements that would support that activity and support those ground floor uses.
Okay, thank you. Is it okay if I ask another one? It's related.
Of course, sure.
Then I was curious because I didn't follow the project. It's really nice looking. 100, the one closest to the train station, Central Expressway. Did that one have encouraged or required commercial in the ground floor when it came forward, or when it was proposed?
Yeah,
or maybe
so
not, sorry, not proposed. Did staff encourage or require ground floor?
So I don't believe anybody is at the meeting now that has a lot of intimate knowledge about the process for that development. So I'm not sure that we can give you, the full story for that development's process. What I can say is that it was a rezoning process that they went through. So there wasn't any standards or zoning language that was that the project was built according to or consistent with. The P district that they're in now is really the zoning that applies to that site. There was also a council process, including study sessions, that informed the design of that project. I don't have all the details about what happened at each of those study sessions or public comment going into those study sessions, but certainly the council would have had an opportunity through the rezoning process to require some retail, and obviously that didn't end up happening.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nunez.
I guess I have a bit of a follow-up to Commissioner Yin's line of thinking there. With regard to the state density bonus, my understanding, I'm going to phrase this, I'm not phrasing this in a totally precise way here, so I'm hoping staff can help me out. My understanding is that the city standards, if they're crafted in such a way where they enable more than what the density bonus might be, then in a way, like it's still possible to supersede the state density bonus by doing more than what that standard would be or allow for. Can someone help me out just to confirm it, or if I'm completely in left field, that would also be helpful to know. Looking for some help.
Sure, I can start, and then maybe Director Murdoch can also weigh in. This is something that we're studying with the R3 project. The City Council has directed us to study local bonuses that may supersede, that may be more appealing to developers than the state density bonus by presumably providing more density than the state density bonus. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, whether it's like through a enforceable legal mechanism or through just an incentive that would be a no-brainer to take. Basically, I'm just trying to understand what levers, and I hear that you're kind of working on it right now, but if there is such a manner in which the city can implement levers into the standards such that we are able to retain like the maximum amount of local control, whether we do say something like, hey, we want to have businesses on the ground floor, without commenting on that for myself yet, but to the extent that we say something like that, either we retain the right to be able to condition that, or we just provide the kind of framework that almost all developers would actually pursue.
Sure. Yeah, so that is something that we have as a framework in North Bay Shore and East Wisman. We use it somewhat effectively to maintain some local discretion. What I will say is that, state density bonus law is changing all the time, and there's new language in state density bonus law that may complicate implementation of such a program. We don't really know how that language should be interpreted at this point, and so we need to continue to study that. There are also some challenges from the perspective in Moffett, where the existing allowed zoning is already 60 plus dwelling units per acre. And so to provide a more appealing density bonus than that would be a very high density. So, as a frame of reference, the base density in East Wisman and North Bayshore is closer to 30 units per acre, so about half as much. And in order to have that carrot in East Wisman and North Bayshore, 2.5 to 3.5 times the density to the bonus is probably what's necessary. So that just gives you an idea, frame of reference for what would be necessary to include in for a local bonus in Moffett. If that's something that council is interested in, it's certainly something that we can study. But there are definitely some, there are other challenges with implementing a local bonus. And I'll just see if Assistant Director Blazinski or Director Murdoch want to add anything.
Yeah, I think that Eric said it pretty well. Amber Blazinski, Assistant Community Development Director. I think the only thing I'd add is, we are continuously looking into this to try to navigate the slightly murky waters of the new updates to the density bonus law. And so I think we'll have a clearer picture when this comes back. But for now, we're still looking at it as an option, potentially.
Great. So, then, as of right now, and without kind of commenting on my opinion on this matter yet, just in the realm where we would, for example, want to have as much discretion as possible with regard to requiring something like ground floor retail. which, if any, and if it's none, then it's none, but which of any of these plans, as currently put forward, does staff have, kind of relative confidence would kind of most enable us to be able to sustain that discretion? Knowing I'm not going to hold anyone to anything, but I'm just trying to get a directional sense of things. So yeah, that'd be great to hear staff's take on that.
Well, I think it's the approach that we've put forward of the higher density being associated with commercial to kind of help the commercial pencil out is more likely. You are more likely to get commercial in that scenario. And of course, that's part of alternative C, and it's all of alternative B. I think also to the extent that, encourage would not be fully enforceable, and we would take all the measures that the encourage language from alternative A wouldn't be fully enforceable. We could take all of those measures and also apply them to alternative B. So does that answer your question? I think alternative B would be more likely to result in commercial.
Thank you. And then alternative C is seeking to ensure that discretion by applying like specific parts in this where the higher intensity mixed use is like the designated land use versus the rest of the plan. Is that correct?
Alternative C is really a mix of A and B for different properties. So it's the alternative A policies for most of the corridor and the alternative B policies for 2 nodes along the corridor.
Okay, and then last question here. I did notice that we are breaking this into 2 questions. One, the second one being around the kind of streetscape. But I'm just in terms of like the activation of this. With regard to the first question, independent of the kind of streetscape decisions, to the extent that's possible for now, how much like inherent activation are we looking at with regard to each alternative in terms of the most kind of like lively ground floor, like just inherent to that like increase in density. If you can kind of just give me a sense of which of these plans might kind of produce that, greatest sense of kind of like active ground floor.
Well, I think there's a couple of ways that you could look at that. I think the one way that you could look at it is the overall level of activity along the corridor, which would probably be maximized through alternative B. Another way you could look at it is this focused approach, where you are really trying to concentrate activity, because being able to see other people, being able to see a mix of businesses, being able to have a event or something like that works well with the public improvements and businesses in the area can really foster a higher degree of activity in a smaller space than if that same amount of commercial activity was spread along the corridor. So it really depends on, on your, on kind of what metric of area you're looking at, right? Total amount of activity or density of activity.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may just offer another perspective and bounce a question off of Advanced Planning Manager Anderson. Eric, do you think another way to think about this would be, to your remark about alternative B having a higher level of activity if the plan was fully implemented holds true, but conversely, alternative C might give a greater probability of high intensity commercial activation if a fewer number of properties developed, particularly the nodal components of alternative C? So I think that might be an important distinction.
So to clarify, you're saying that if demand for commercial space is focused, it's more likely that commercial space will be developed in that area. Is that what you're saying?
In part, but I think just recognizing some of the focus areas in the nodal component of Alternative C, that you could get some sort of improved activation if fewer properties developed, particularly the most intensive parts. Sometimes we know that not all of the properties in a planning area will redevelop consistent with the plan in a reasonable period of time, but perhaps a fewer number of key properties in the nodes, the node centers, if they developed consistent with the plan, that you might achieve that level of activation in a way that would require more of the corridor and Alternative B.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a possibility.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vice Chair Nunez. I will take presidential privilege and I will ask questions now. I'm intrigued. I saw the report, I read it. So there's a lot to read. But here's my question. I've got two that are pretty much simple, right? My reading of what you had written about community input, I appreciated that for what it was. And there was more detail involved this time around, which I appreciated as well. Because you get a good sense of what happened, who said what, why, and when. So my question, though, I didn't get as much of that with the business side to it. So I'm intrigued with, what did the business community members say about these alternatives, A, B, and C? When you all did the walkthroughs in February, and you had input also from community members at the farmers market, I get that. But for the business side of the community, in that side of the, in that neighborhood, what was the feedback from them? Did they have a preference for one of these three? And did they also opine about anything else that came to mind that might be in relationship to that? Those are my two questions that I have.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. You know, my understanding of that business walk is that the most of the conversation was really focused on opportunities for input. I think the questions were asked, but maybe the businesses weren't fully prepared at that time to provide input, you know, at that time. And so we offered these other opportunities to provide input. I will see if our consultant from MIG might have any thing to add about what was found during that process.
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. Dan Amsden with MIG. And to build off of Assistant Director Anderson's comments, we did the direct walks, door-to-door walks to business owners. It was actually before the workshop, so before the alternatives were fully public, but we did hear a lot of concerns about less foot traffic, rising vacancies, maybe competition with Castro Street as well. But as part of both the workshop and also the online survey, we asked the question of whether you own businesses or property in the Moffett Boulevard area as well. So as we start to summarize this data, as the survey is still open right now, I think it's a great point. We can also summarize based on people who responded that they own property and businesses as well as sort of a subset of feedback.
Okay, great. So I have a follow-up question, and you may or may not have a response to this because it's just a question. And then I'm done. So if we're seeing businesses struggling right now to open up shop on Castro, what's the reality of them being able to open up on the other side of Central Expressway? Even though you'll have new development, hopefully one way or another, what makes you envision that we'll have takers to fill those ground level floor units when in the majority of the city, those same types of options aren't really filled?
Sure, I'll start and then maybe pass it to Eric and others on staff. So we do have a retail and office consultants as part of this process as well, and they've also been reaching out to business owners and stakeholders. There's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of vacancies, and one of the concerns is as new property or new projects redevelop, most likely their leases would be higher because it's new development, so that's another concern. One of the positives, though, from just a market area standpoint is more residents and more people and especially if it's community serving uses, those can be seen as very positive along the corridor. So it would be a discussion as we go more detail into the planning process on how to sort of do business retention or also staging as those new uses come in. I think that's partially why there was that flexibility, but also that intentional question in the community about encourage versus require and what's the right balance.
Understood. Thank you so much for that. And it just dawned on me. I'm so sorry, Commissioners. One last question.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm understanding the process correctly, as we delve into these issues and try to answer these questions 1 and 2, these are what we would think right now would be the best approaches to move forward. And then eventually, City Council has a right to either yay or nay it, and they can modify it as well. So what we move on with here may not necessarily be, in the end, what's going to come back or what's going to be voted on. Am I understanding the process correctly?
Yes, Chair Gutierrez, that's correct. So there's multiple more touch points throughout this process, and ultimately it is up to Council. So Council will provide feedback on these questions and provide their direction to staff on these questions, based in large part, I think, on the deliberation that happens tonight. They do listen to and watch the EPC meeting and read our summaries of the EPC meetings. But they will provide the ultimate direction to staff that will start the drafting process and the EIR process and all the other processes that we need to go through in order to draft the precise plan. But even that isn't final direction, right? The final direction comes from the adoption of the plan. So there will be multiple touch points with both EPC and Council getting to that point.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. And I wanted to bring that up intentionally so that everyone understands here. This is the first step of a long journey. So thank you. I'm done. Commissioner Yen.
Thank you. The questions from other commissioners were really helpful. I wanted to follow up on what Chair Gutierrez was saying with his questions, and that was thinking about the existing businesses. And I remember reading that a lot of people were really hopeful. A lot of people in the community were hopeful to retain the existing businesses. And I was just curious if in any of the alternatives, is there a high likelihood that we can retain the existing businesses for each of the alternatives? Can we do that? Is it possible?
So I think certainly alternative B gives the highest opportunity for business retention. Right now, we don't have any policies in the alternatives that's specifically about encouraging small business retention, although Council has directed us to study this along with one of the housing element programs. And so as we study this, we may be able to apply the outcome of that to this process as well. I will defer to either Planner Snelling or our MIG consultant to see kind of what the current scope of work has to say about small business displacement and that similar issue.
I'll quickly add, the topic has come up quite a bit through this process in the community, the business, I think our last EPC meeting, as well as Council. So it is part of our scope to study and analyze as part of the policy development in the next phase. So that policy would apply to whichever land use alternative Council ultimately directs us on.
Okay, so at this point, there's no thinking as to which one would be more likely other than what Mr. Anderson had already stated.
Correct, because B has more retail ground for use,
right.
so that larger volume would allow.
Okay, so then in that respect, just going back a little bit to what Commissioner Nunez had asked also regarding the ability to have the city retain a little bit more control. And what I heard was the answer in past experience was that density would have to go 2 to 3 times higher than what we're proposing in order to retain that control. So then it seems to me it's a little bit less likely that, I don't know, maybe, you know, it would have to go back to the community and more studies and more input to see whether or not that is something that they'd be interested in. But I was curious because in the past we'd learned that building types, there are certain building types, and there's one that is very common that sort of maxes out at 7 to 8 stories. Beyond that, it jumps considerably in cost. So I was wondering if in the alternatives we are saying 4 to 7 or 7 to 9, I feel like we're sort of losing control. How do I word this? 4 to 7, developers are going to want to maximize. They're going to want to get up to the maximum of that building type. And in that case, it seems more likely they're going to choose the state density bonus over ours because ours is not 2 to 3 times. If we're going for alternative B, then it's 7 to 9 stories, we're hitting that maximum. And I was thinking that there was the chance that that would help encourage our local control and our levers. But from what I heard earlier, it doesn't cut it. So it would still be the state density bonus in that case too. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear.
Commissioner Donahue.
So on alternative C, and I know that alternative C you said is just kind of a stake in the ground and that there can be tweaks and things like that. But as shown here, 100 Moffett is part of the higher density. And as far as in the R3 discussion that we had previously, and I know this is a different process with different rules, but one of the criteria in that process was to kind of not maximize the density in areas that are unlikely to be redeveloped. And since 100 Moffett is a fairly recent project, it was interesting to me that that's shown as being something that's of the higher density. I mean, it does, you know, if that hadn't been redeveloped recently, that might be a reasonable place to increase the density. But what is the probability of that actually, of them tearing down a 4-story building to build a 6-story building? And why was that kind of chosen as part of alternative C?
Really just to acknowledge the access to the transit center. The likelihood of redevelopment, as you say, is very low. That building currently has a very high value given how new it is. And we certainly don't see it redeveloping for quite a long time. I would say that, building construction costs can change over quite a long period of time. New construction technologies can come out. Certainly the state density bonus can affect standards over a long period of time. And so providing a little bit of policy nudge in that location through a higher allowed density may have an effect over a long period of time.
Okay, so yeah, long-term thinking. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham.
I had a few questions. So I noticed in the staff report mention of the Adobe House as a historical resource. Are there any other properties in this area that could be considered a significant historical resource? And also, how would each of the 3 alternatives, A, B, and C, differ in how they may preserve or treat such properties?
So there aren't any other buildings that are on any official, historic registers, state, local, or national. I do want to remind the commission that we're also working on an update to our historic preservation ordinance and our historic register. And that's something that is currently underway. We expect to complete it, in the next year and a half or so. And we're currently doing a comprehensive assessment of properties in the city to determine their eligibility for historic listing. One other property, 243 Moffett, the auto body shop there, has been shortlisted in that study. I don't have any more information at this time about, whether that is going to result in listing or eligibility, but I will say that it's been shortlisted. And the final determination likely won't happen until, like I said, the next year and a half. How does it affect, how do the standards here affect the preservation of those buildings? Was that your follow-up question? Likely not. There's always, the historic preservation ordinance will apply to any building on the local, state, or national register. And so that any developer will need to comply with that process if they are trying to redevelop a property that has a historic resource on it. And that means additional environmental review. It means additional discretion by the city council to approve or deny a project. And so that likely won't change given the level of density that's allowed on the property. That's not to say that developers that are allowed more density might be more motivated to bring forward projects, which could mean more work for the city to review those projects and bring them forward to the city council. And so this is all just dependent on the fact of us, completing and identifying those properties on our register.
Thank you. I did have another separate question. Are there any special considerations for the Hetch Hetchy right-of-way in this area?
I believe Assistant Public Works Director, City Engineer Ed Arango is in the audience and may have a response to this.
Good evening. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Ed Arango, Assistant Public Works Director and City Engineer. There are special considerations for the Hetch Hetchy right-of-way, and the considerations are really around restrictions. The Hetch Hetchy right-of-way is land owned and maintained by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and any proposed improvements or changes on their land require special written authorization from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. We say SFPUC pretty consistently for that, for short. In addition, there's a 2019 Memorandum of Agreement between the SFPUC and the city on existing uses, sort of legacy uses that the city had. So the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement, provides for sort of 7 specific site licenses for use of city uses on the Hetch Hetchy or the SFPUC's right-of-way. Again, this is their land and property proper. So some examples are parks, trails, gardens, again, with specific identified conditions. Generally, the SFPUC doesn't allow any improvements. Again, these are legacy, except for one of them from the 2019. We knew we were going to do a new park. This was Fayette Park. And so we included that with the MOA, but all the other sites were legacy. SFPUC has pretty consistently and clearly communicated to the city that maintaining their right-of-way in respect to their ability to maintain their water infrastructure, because that's what the right-of-way is there for. Their lands is the Hetch Hetchy or the water aqueducts that serve many agencies throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. So their interest is really protecting that and ensuring that they can maintain it at any time and not disrupt or disrupt any community amenities that are on their property. So they're again, pretty restrictive. And lastly, I know that you had a question, but thank you in advance for submitting the questions. It helps us kind of gather the information. There's no plans for a linear park currently adjacent to the Moffett corridor.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Nunez.
I have 3 follow-up questions. With regard to the alternatives and like any of them individually or as a whole, and the viability of ground floor retail, did the results or ongoing progress of the economic vitality study or the kind of economic development plan that we've been working on in any way inform this kind of the development of these proposals here? If so, in what ways, or if there's some kind of like commentary that we might have at hand with regard to the viability longer term versus kind of like more shorter term, if we have insight there.
I do think that there is opportunity for us to look to the economic vitality strategy as we get into the details of this plan. But I think the kind of scale of information in the economic vitality strategy versus these kind of big picture land use alternatives is kind of a different scale. So I'll see if Assistant Director Blazinski or Director Murdoch can think of anything from the economic vitality strategy that might overlap with this project.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. Christian Murdoch, Community Development Director. And I think Mr. Anderson said it well, that the scale of analysis is different, but we can look for inspiration and guidance from the economic vitality strategy when crafting subsequent components of the Moffett Boulevard Precise Plan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Second question, with regard to the activation, sometimes it's not, in terms of like encouraging versus requiring. If there's a scenario where at the end of the day we go forward with the encourage versus require, what have you, is it still possible, or does any of these alternatives, and is it possible for us to require that the ground floor be used for things in residential development that would give the kind of like, I don't know if the veneer of activities, but like actual activity, like gyms or pools or recreation areas, like little courtyard seating table, whatever that kind of looks like. Is that part or requirable through any of these, in terms of our discretion? And would state density bonus, if we were ever to require something like that, also still allow for the kind of like preclusion of that, or developers to kind of like void that requirement for recreation at ground floor in place of retail?
I think the same would apply. I think whatever would apply to commercial would also apply to any standards around residential amenity areas on the ground floor. What I will say is that we have seen a lot of residential developments push forward those residential amenity areas intentionally because they want their residents to have a little bit more privacy. So that's something that they, unless the site is very constrained, is already popular with residential developers.
Awesome, thanks. And then the last question here, is there anything in our city code, in this plan as proposed, alternatives, or even in state law that would either preclude, require, or disallow the use of any kind of specific or any building materials, construction methods, anything regarding how a building is constructed and what it's constructed of in the Moffett area?
Building codes apply, universally, and building codes do set strict requirements for, materials, construction. Do you mean like aesthetic, or
do we?
Like
is there anything?
or...
I'll just ask specifically then. Given that, is there anything that would preclude the use of newer materials, like such as mass timber or I think like laminate, in terms of buildings in this plan? Does our current city code countervail the use of that currently?
I'm afraid I don't know enough about the building code to answer that question. Maybe Director Murdoch or Assistant Director Blazinski might be able to weigh in.
Not to my knowledge in the city's building code, and we haven't gotten anywhere near that stage where we might suggest standards in the Moffett Boulevard Precise Plan that could run contrary to the ability to use those kinds of construction materials. Ultimately, some of them may influence the size of structure depending on the engineering methods and techniques and suitability of the different materials. So it's hard to say whether a particular material would enable a 6 or 7 story building to be constructed, but those are typically, as Mr. Anderson noted, details in the building permit phase, subject to building code requirements.
So it sounds like we're not even there yet.
We're certainly not there yet, and I'm not sure we will venture there. It's really not the nature of a precise plan typically to regulate those kinds of issues.
Perfect, thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions regarding EPC question number 1? Which land use alternative does the EPC recommend? Is a preferred land use alternative? Does the EPC recommend any modifications to that alternative? If not, we'll move on to discussion of said questions. I'll start. So, I think this is very noble. I think we're trying to do the best we can under the circumstances. I try to be an optimist in all these proceedings in general, but when I look at current conditions, I'm glad we didn't put a timeline to this specifically saying this has to be done by said time frame. I'm thinking in the next 4 years, because of what we have right now at the national level, there's a lot of economic uncertainty. And if costs to items for construction are expensive now, with tariffs, they'll be more expensive, which means developers will second guess themselves with trying to do something in the foreseeable short-term future. Once a lot of this stuff is cleared up, I would think possibly there may be an opportunity then to jump on that in case there is correction, whether because those items that are happening now will then not be on the books and they'll be revised so that we can go back to what we had before with a more sound economic situation at the national level, where interest rates may not be affected. The feds just say, well, we're not going to increase the rates, we're going to leave it now as is. And that's great, but there's still uncertainty. And with that, there's expense and cost. So I'm not seeing anything, I don't think anything in the short-term future is going to happen. I'm hoping I'm wrong. And if it does, hey, more power to them. But right now, as it is, development in California and in our area is pretty limited right now. So I am intrigued by both B and C. They both have plus and minuses. I know for density's sake and for housing fans, B is the ideal because you get a little bit more of everything. But I like the concept of the nodes. C got my attention because I look at that as more of holding on to some sort of local control of what we want things to look like. Because it's a mix between A and B, and so we would have a little bit more of a say in terms of what will look like in certain areas within that neighborhood. And I like having that sense of empowerment there because it seems like whenever there are proposals that come to us for development, such as business and housing, there's always give and takes, and we always give. We don't really get anything in return. It's a rarity when that happens. Even when we've had developers come to the EPC in recent years, I can't remember one time where we made a suggestion, they actually understood it, ran with it, came back and said, hey, City Council, we have revised our plan based on EPC recommendations and suggestions. This is what we think we can do. I don't remember that. And I hate to say it because you would think that in this period of time, that would have happened a couple times, a handful of times. But I can't speak to that right now. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm leaning towards C or B. I like the idea of the nodes. And I'll leave that at that. Now, in terms of priorities or recommendations for modifications of the alternatives, I'm fine with all of the alternatives in general. If other commissioners want to mix and match, that's fine. Just let me know so I can be clear with taking these notes down, because in the end, I've got to give a summary to the team of what we all think. So there you go. Vice Chair Nunez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gutierrez. I largely agree with appreciating different aspects of BNC personally, and also in light of Mr. Murdoch's kind of elucidation, $5 word here, in terms of the probability of activation versus like opportunity for activation. I do like this concept of nodes, while liking the increased housing opportunities of alternative B. I would like to see what a more blended option of those would look like, and how that might be kind of like structured in an optimal way, whether as informed by the economic vitality study, opportunities to keep small businesses here. And as much as I would like to also kind of, fall in alignment with some of the public commentary around requiring ground floor retail as part of alternative B, I'm also just generally kind of concerned not just about the current rate of vacancies, but then also, when it comes to kind of that state bonus, kind of supplanting and superseding some of that. And so that's why, with regard to some of the uncertainty that my colleague, Chair Gutierrez was noting here, the way that, at least to the best of my knowledge, that you can kind of like countervail, or at least in my view, countervail some of that uncertainty is not by constraining options, but by providing more, right? And so that's why this, like, one of the key phrases that I kind of see in this document is like up to, right? And like, I think staff report, and it says like, it's up to, and these are kind of like ranges, right? In terms of like the density units, housing density up to around 75, up to around 100. So this is inherently implying an option, right? And so for me, when I'm thinking about this, I do think that it is, in terms of like discretion and control, I'm not interested in local control right now as a means or manners around like what the state density bonus is going to preclude or not, or kind of like sweep out from under our feet. Because we always have discretion. We always have local control to do more than what the state requires. Until and unless we want to kind of like, either get the state legislature to do away with state density bonuses, or if we just want to ignore what the state has as a floor for us, we always have the discretion to reach for our own ceilings. And so when I'm, kind of like processing and thinking, how do we actually, to the extent that we want to have requirements like, we require ground floor retail, which I'm not necessarily supporting, but just in that realm, we want to require ground floor retail, then the only way that we can do that or incentivize that and kind of deliver on what people are seeking, as far as the public comment goes, is to reach higher than the state density bonus. And if that does mean that it's, like 2 or 3 times that is along the lines of Commissioner Yin's concerns, and is requiring, kind of like more, kind of like that higher level of density, then that, I mean, personally, and I think, the commission, my colleagues in the commission know where I stand on this. Personally, to me, that's okay. That's fine. Because all we're doing is giving options and laying that as a, possibility for people to have more capability, more capacity, more options, and less constraint. And to the extent that, as Mr. Murdoch just kind of like stated, we're not even at the point yet, and there's no like immediate kind of like discussion of what material or what construction methods, aside from the kind of fact that we are in a different kind of more innovative phase of materials, which I'm not going to get into right now. There's no need to nerd out on wood. To me, it's less of a concern to say let's go higher, and yeah, maybe we do get like a 12-story building out of it. Maybe the way that things get built these days is more efficient, more like lean or whatever. Then I'm open to that because we're not constraining. We're just giving options as much as we can to serve the community in light of all this uncertainty. So if there is no blended option, I would go with option B if I had to choose. And that's a hard choice because, again, I do like the nodes, but I would be interested in a blend of C's nodes and the density of B with the option to kind of go higher to be able to get more of what we want on the ground floor.
Okay, so you have C nodes with density of B. So a mix. So not either A, B, or C straight up, but a mix. Okay, sounds good. Commissioner Cranston.
Okay, so I'll walk through my thoughts. The area that's called the future study area between Central Avenue and Central Expressway is listed there. That's pretty much all exclusively single-family homes right now. The shallow depth of the area along Moffett concerns me about the ability to actually get something that has the kind of openness and attractiveness of the residents. It's also right next to the Adobe house. Commissioner Donahue mentioned the question about the node on the other side. So I'm questioning going higher there. I'm also questioning even including the ground floor. My business in San Francisco is an area that's in one of those fringes, okay? And it's always kind of interesting to me to watch how the other mixed-use buildings across the street hide the fact that they actually have space for rent on the other side of the, they disguise it. They actually have to show something that it's for lease, okay? I didn't know what they were charging, and I don't know if City Council is looking at it, but it turns out that it's like $6,000 a year if they're not getting these things, if the landlords are leasing these things, and they're paying it because they don't think they can lease the space in the ground floor. So I'm skeptical of retail commercial serving that is spread out. I like the idea of concentrating it. So I like the node between Central Avenue and Cypress Point. If I were going to modify this, I would actually do B from Central Avenue to Central Expressway and C from, and I guess it's A from Central Expressway to Central Avenue and B from Central Avenue to Cypress Point on both sides, okay? I don't know why I would not have removed the high density from the west side of Moffett. I would have let that whole area, it's got some restaurants in it today, it's got a liquor store in it, and little convenience stores, the places across the street. There's a level of activity around those that it would be great to keep. So my C would be different than your C. It would be A from Central Avenue South and B from Central Avenue up to Cypress Point. I don't have a strong opinion about the gas station at where the Valero is. It's too darn small to do anything with, so I don't have a strong opinion about that. But I would like to see, if we're going to encourage more density and get the requirement, let's make that whole area that, and remove the requirement for the the ground floor retail in the Central to Central Expressway area. And I understand the theory of the node at Central Expressway, but in all the things you have to do to put together this plan, if you have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to make that node work, that's a waste of time, in my opinion, because it's not going to redevelop. And, you know, Prometheus has said on multiple occasions they keep their properties for 50 years, and that's a Prometheus building, and so they're not going to redevelop that corner. So spend staff's time looking at the other parts of it would be my recommendation. So I'm looking at I would prefer a modified C. Is that clear?
Commissioner Cranston, yes, I get that. So in terms of the modified C, though, are you going for the...
What you see in alternative B from Central up to
I get
Cypress
that.
Point.
But in terms of like the required and encouraged and...
Require there.
Required, okay.
But then in the area between Central Avenue and Central Expressway, you see nothing required or even encouraged. I mean, well, it's encouraged, but that's fine. But that's not necessarily. Okay.
Understood.
And with respect to the density bonus, there was a project that went before council recently that didn't actually need the density bonus to meet its numbers, but used the density bonus to get waivers anyway. So developers are using the density bonus even when it doesn't need to be used to get density. They're doing it to get waivers. So it's, in my opinion, a misuse of the intention of the law, but it's something they're allowed to do at this point. And until Scott Wiener and friends change it, that's what's going to happen, okay? So I think we have to assume that every project is going to have a density bonus, whether it's a townhome or a 7-story building, okay? It's just, they're going to be waivers, period. So I'm not as worried about that as maybe others are.
Thank you, Commissioner Cranston. Commissioner Donahue.
So I am also attracted by option C. I do like, as Commissioner Cranston said, kind of concentrating the retail in certain areas makes sense. I mean, that's why we have a downtown instead of just having, well, we do have things throughout, of course, throughout the city, but having kind of a focal point, I think really does make sense. I think that the focal point between Central Avenue and Cypress Point does make sense, especially considering the size of the parcels there and the depth, as Commissioner Cranston pointed out. The one concern I have, at least about part of what he said, on the other side of Moffett, is that some of those parcels are actually no deeper than the parcels between Central Expressway and Central Avenue, like where the St. James Infirmary used to be, and those first few ones. The larger parcels are potentially deep enough to be able to support something that's larger without being unreasonable, I guess. I do have some concerns about the 100 Moffett, as you might have guessed from my earlier question. I think that it's unlikely to be developed. I understand the long-term thinking. That makes sense, I guess. But also, if there's required retail there, it doesn't seem like a good location. I mean, it's right on this prominent corner. You think, boy, this is really a great place. Everybody's going to see it, but nobody's going to really be able to kind of get to it. So it seems less like a good place to focus retail, whereas something that's more in the middle of the neighborhood, such as between Central Avenue and Cypress Point, does seem like a place that is in the middle of the neighborhood. People can come from the block south, the block north, et cetera, and it's just more accessible. So I leaning towards option C, not keen on 100 Moffett. Maybe consider some of the things on the other side, that the two larger parcels. I haven't had a lot of time to digest that yet, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Donahue. Commissioner Yen.
Okay. Lots of thoughts while you guys are talking. Thank you for your comments because it helps me think. All right, where am I? I'm just going to go through a little bit my process here. I also recall a lot of retail consultants have said they prefer retail to be connected or in nodes clustered. It helps people, shops tend to like that better. And I believe that to be true. I also think the depth of certain sites does lend itself to being able to support that a little bit more. My questions earlier, I am concerned that we're going to, boost up the FAR and then not get any of what we want. But I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk in the hope that the possibility of doing kind of a version of C will pan out in time. And what I'm looking to do to alter it is it's unlikely that the little bit at 100 Moffett is going to happen anytime soon. So, but I'm okay with the concept. So it's going to be unlikely. The concept is there. That's for the future. All right, it's close to the transit. There are a lot of people who live on that side. If they're coming to transit, then maybe they'll pass by, right? I'm really hoping that the existing businesses can stay. I kind of feel like the first block on the opposite side, it is very shallow. I'm thinking it'll just stay as is. It would be nice to just retain the businesses. Once you redevelop, it becomes expensive. They're probably gonna have to go. And I don't wanna see that. So I'm thinking just that it would be likely with that depth that it remains small, little neighborhood serving retail and services. And that would be great, I think. Maybe with the future study, when that kicks in behind it, that little piece, I don't know, more could be done when you look at them together. I don't know. But I think for now, keeping it the way it is fine, but maintaining the existing businesses is a priority there. That would connect then to the node of the wider chunk that's highlighted in red, which you guys are calling out to be the required. And this is where I'm taking the risk in the hopes that we get something. I believe people were hoping for a cafe. I don't even know if a little grocery store could fit in there. That is my hope. Would it be great? Yeah. And then the little, yeah. I think I'll leave it there. I think that is probably what I'm thinking is sort of the best for now.
Commissioner Ian, so C nodes with required.
C nodes with required.
Okay. That sounds good. Commissioner Pham.
So I also thank my colleagues here for their discussion, a lot of things to think about and learn from, so I appreciate that. For me, a lot of alternative B and C make sense, especially with this area, with its proximity to downtown and proximity to Caltrain and BTA. I think having like a focused mixed use is important. And so I think C is calling to me, although both B and C do allow for more density. I agree with a lot of my colleagues that the deeper parcels probably have more opportunity for successful ground floor retail. And so I would like to, agree or propose that, those parcels between Central and Cypress Point be required ground floor retail, and then potentially more like alternative A between Central and Willowgate.
Okay, so in that case, that's different from Commissioner Cranston's perspective. So we have all like a lot of unique perspectives, with the consensus being focusing on combo between B and C. Commissioner Cranston?
I just wanted to add to Commissioner Donohue's comment. The small parcels between right at Central and Moffett on the east side, I thought about the fact that they're smaller. The fact that they're next to a larger property, one of the things that's been talked about is encouraging consolidation, and so it seemed having it right next to a big lot, that those would be more likely to be pulled into the bigger lots. So that's why in my head, I had them in there, but I understand your concern, but I'm not set on them being there, but that was my thinking, was that they might get pulled in the future.
Commissioner Yen?
Thanks. I forgot to add a couple things. I don't know if we're there yet or not, or if you want to take the comments down, but given that there are some taller buildings, I was hoping that we could step back when we get closer to the existing homes, and also encouraging the paseos and throughways to start to break up the grid a little bit more. These are long blocks. If we can get the parking tucked towards the back, shared access ways for service. There was one more. It just left my brain. It's okay. I'm going to let it go for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Yen. So, okay, so I think I'm going to ask staff here for mutual understanding. But what I'm still hearing is a combo of B and C with a lot of variety in terms of requirement or non-requirement. I don't see like a consensus on that end. Correct? Yeah. Okay.
I think what I'm hearing, Chair, is a combo of A and B to make a different C, is what I'm hearing. And so I think generally there's a coalescing around between Central Expressway and Central Avenue, the lower density option and option A. And then from Central Avenue to Cypress Point, the higher density option B approach to create that reformulated option B, or option C rather. What I didn't capture clearly from Commissioner Yin's comments was the thinking about the area between Central Expressway and Central Avenue. Heard you talk about trying to preserve the businesses and focus new development and commercial opportunities north of Central Avenue. But it wasn't clear to me if the implication of that was you were recommending perhaps a commercial-only designation between Central Expressway and Central Avenue, because we would need to have some discussion about our housing element obligations and minimum density objectives, if that was an implication of what you were describing.
Maybe I should clarify. I meant that it seemed the likelihood was that it would remain, given that it's such a small parcel. I don't mind that it could go to housing with the requirement that the ground floor still be retail or neighborhood serving, because it would then connect the node all the way to the train station, which is, I would think, given what we're envisioning for this area, would be a very kind of no-brainer of retail connection, if possible. It would be awesome if it would be the existing businesses that could return, but this is just my thought. And also, yes, there's a future development behind it later, and if we'll just leave it at that. Yeah, there's something maybe you could do.
And so I think there were maybe kind of three subcomponents that were remaining in my mind. What to do with 100 Moffett? I think generally commissioners were preferring maybe the lower density approach, recognizing that the site may not redevelop, but any number of things could happen, including calamities that cause the building to be uninhabitable and rebuilt, or otherwise destroyed, heaven forbid, but long-term thinking here, it's a possibility. And then what to do with those smaller parcels on the west side of Moffett that Commissioners Donahue and Cranston were discussing, sort of the different philosophies about the depth of the parcels, whether to keep them at the lower or higher densities. And then the gas station parcel, there was some discussion, I think, about that being somewhat disconnected in a certain perspective, and whether a lower or higher density was appropriate there. I think if we can sort of quickly move through those pieces, I think that's generally what I'd heard in terms of closest thing to a majority opinion so far.
Okay, cool, because I didn't hear that. I heard like 3 and 3. So I'm glad you chimed in, because I still don't get consensus either way. But if we can start with that, that'd be great. Look, I want to move things faster because it's 8:40. I don't want to be here till 10. 100 lower density is fine with me. Smaller parcels, lower or higher, I'd go with lower. Gas station, lower or higher, I'd go with lower. That's where I'm starting off with for those topics. Who would like to chime in next?
Or Chair, potentially, if there's a straw poll, you might be able to gauge the level of support, and if there's a specific
Yeah, I was trying to
piece.
avoid that, but okay. I'm not a big fan of straw polls, but let's do it. Let's go with the straw poll. Who is in favor for the 100 parcel? Oh, I'm sorry, for the 100. Are we in favor of lower density? All those in favor, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. So we're half.
The one on the corner to the west?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you still higher or lower?
Oh, I'm fine leaving it the way it is in version C, alternative C.
So lower. So then we have 4, because that's moved along. Okay, great. Yes. 1, 2, 3.
No, version C is, that little bit is higher, right, in version C? Oh, let me see.
Yes, in alternative C, the 100 Moffett parcel is higher.
So you're not
density.
lower, you're higher.
Correct.
Okay, so we're still at 3 and 3.
Because I don't think it's going to get redeveloped anyway, and because of some comments that I heard earlier about how people may pass going to the train station, I'm okay with the higher. So I'm okay with what's shown in version C. I think that might break the logjam there.
I don't know.
It doesn't?
It's still 3 and 3.
No, I thought
3, 4. Oh, wait. So
higher.
Let's do this again. For lower, raise your hand. 1, 2, just 2. Higher, okay. The hires have it. I'm in C-spot run mode, so let's just go. Okay, for the smaller parcels that have been pointed out, all those in favor of higher, raise your hand.
Which small parcel?
Christian, for clarity.
Thank you, Chair. I think we were talking about the 3 parcels sort of on the northwest quadrant of Central Avenue in Moffett. So there was the discussion, and I thought the closest thing to a majority, to use my words, of the areas north of Central to Cypress Point having the higher density, right, as the Commission's reformulated alternative C. And then there was the dialogue between Commissioners Cranston and Donahue about whether those 3 parcels on the west side of Moffett, closest to Central Avenue, should be in the higher or lower density, given the concern about parcel size and depth that lent itself to lower density being preferred between Central Avenue and Central Expressway.
I guess like one of the things I'm kind of concerned over is getting into kind of like a parcel by parcel discussion. I was thinking, you know, in terms of like, aside from that corner on the of that Prometheus one, because I fully agree, I don't think it's going to get redeveloped anytime soon. So aside literally from that one corner and having nodes go elsewhere, at least I'll just kind of throw out there the speaking for myself version of this is almost like just pitching it back to staff with high level guidance, being like, hey, like. And this is my version of my opinion, but similarly with high-level guidance as applicable to everyone else's opinion, like, hey, go find a way to blend B and implement the node concept of C in a manner befitting this new blended version. At least that's the way I was thinking about it, not specific on a parcel by parcel basis. If everyone else wants to go on a parcel by parcel basis, I'm then obviously like outvoted, but I was just, yeah, thinking I'd throw that out there for starting higher and then going more granular.
Commissioner Donahue.
And I wasn't necessarily even agreeing with Commissioner Cranston on the other two large parcels. I'm still trying to come to some thoughts on that. My inclination is actually to go with the Plan C as proposed. Actually, at this point, probably literally, including 100 Moffett and the other between Central and Cypress Point, and then everything else kind of the lower density.
So Plan C as proposed? Just the way it is?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. All right, well, you and me are in agreement on that front. So, okay. So Christian, having heard that, what's your take now? Because I had understood also that the difference of opinion between Bill and Paul with how they looked at the sites was still evident. I still don't think that we have consensus on that front, but I still hear something different between Commissioner Donahue and Commissioner Cranston, with a little bit of overlap in general with what everyone else has mentioned. The two clear cuts that are pretty distinguishable are Commissioner Donahue's and me with C nodes in general as proposed. Commissioner Yen?
I will just third that then. C.
So we have 3 for C nodes as proposed. Oh, okay. Is there a fourth? And if not, can we still move forward with that perspective, at least for now?
I think so, but I'd like to give an opportunity to the team to weigh in if we're clear on what we're proceeding with.
We can certainly describe the deliberation process and the major issues that arose. If there isn't, if the commission is deadlocked and can't find a majority recommendation, so we're not gonna hold up this process because the commission can't reach a majority. But we would need to kind of provide a little bit more detail about some of the issues that arose and why the commission wasn't able to come to a majority.
Commissioner Cranston?
So if I can ask the 3 who prefer C as is, what's your concern about including the west side of Moffett and that Cypress to Central section?
Commissioner Yen?
Oh, for me personally, it's just the parcels are very small, and then behind it, you have very low density homes. So the way it is.
Just the small ones, not the big parcels?
No, and that one too. It's just not deep. It's very hard to, I mean, it's just as deep as the sort of first block on the east side. So I'm saying just keep with the 4 to 8 or 4 to 7.
Okay. When I visited the sites, those seemed as deep, just as deep as the parcels at the corner of Moffett and Central, where the Prometheus project is today, and those are pretty large. So I guess I wasn't concerned about the depth of that, and I don't know whether staff has the details on what Prometheus is proposing for the plaza there, but it's a pretty dense proposal right now. And could easily be in the range of the high density after the density bonus is applied. So I think we're going to get that, whether we zone it that way or not, at least in the farthest northern parcel along there, the one next to the mobile home park. The hotel is fairly short, you're correct. And that's, so, but it's a fairly large site. And when it's a little deceptive when you look at the 100 Moffett, because it looks like one big parcel, but it's actually 3 distinct buildings, each pretty large. in its form factor. So I wasn't, they're nowhere near as shallow. I could go either way on the three smaller ones. Okay, in my mind, it was, if we're going to do that, let's do that block and be consistent. So the block was there, rather than, and then see if there's an opportunity to, you know, maybe the whoever owns the hotel property could go in and say, can I buy this? Can I buy this? And we get a bigger thing there. So that was, I don't feel super strongly about those three smaller parcels. It just, in my mind, it was, do the whole thing in one way and not split blocks apart in different ways. So that's in my mind why it was there. So I was not worried about the depth of the larger lots on the west side of Moffett, because they were fairly similar to the lots where at 100 Moffett that are already pretty large and could be larger buildings in the future. So.
Commissioner Yen?
Oh, I guess I was still on. Yeah, I'll just say that, yeah, I understand what you're saying, that it is less deep, but each building in 100 Moffett is about the same for the northern part of that parcel, right? So I don't know if it's going to be deep enough to then drop in height to the existing, but maybe that's something in the precise plan. I was just assuming that, you know, given the earlier kind of questions I had, I didn't want to go ahead and say, let's zone it 7 to 9 and still not get retail if they're going to use the state density bonus. If we're going with C, I was hoping to then just congregate all the commercial retail into a node, which is more likely, and just let that be housing with maybe, you know, some of their own stuff in the ground floor that's transparent and nice to look at when you're walking by, but that it remained sort of shorter given the risk that it would go up anyways.
Commissioner Donahue.
Yeah, that's basically my thinking as well. There's some of my concern is the size and the kind of the interface to the areas that are outside the precise plan, actually, which, so we're not even discussing land uses there. And yeah, it's interesting that kind of whatever we do, they're going to go higher anyway. So I don't know.
Commissioner Cranston.
I found it in the staff's, they publish the report every 2 months, something. And 400 Moffett they're proposing 175 units on a 6-story building that's already applying for state density bonus. So the farthest northern project parcel would already be in the higher range. So which is why I wasn't worried about including that in that. It's consistent with what they're requesting already.
So having heard what Commissioner Cranston just shared, does that sway either Commissioner Yen or Donahue? Nope. Okay. So we're still at 3 and 3. What say you, staff? Because I know right now that see, here's the thing. I like to go at the higher level. So when you give me options A, B, or C with requirement or no requirement, I'm going to go that route. I'm not going to get into specifics and partial things out because we're not at the stage. And this is going to be modified later on. So it's straightforward. A, B, C, required, not required, boom, next. But we're not at that level here. Not right now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I have more to offer the commission at this point. I think there's been an extensive dialogue that can inform our description of the debate or deliberation for City Council, so they can hopefully glean from that some relevant factors to use in their own deliberation.
Great. So let's move on to EPC question number 2. What are the EPC's priorities for streetscape improvements on Moffett Boulevard? Questions?
Did we settle on?
Oh, Commissioner Cranston, go for it.
I thought there was a question on the gas station. You had left that as a third open question. Did we answer that?
I did think that was the third subject area.
Great. So let's delve into that. Who would like to opine? Or did we want to do the straw poll? On the gas station, the parcel. Yeah, because I think there's just, what, one gas station over there? At the corner on the right-hand side? Yeah. So let me phrase it this way, and I'm open to suggestions. Are we looking at that for higher density? Are we in favor of that? Commissioner Cranston.
Alternative C has that as the lower of the two, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the staff recommendation on that person.
Commissioner Yen?
I'll go with that.
As will I. And we see consensus. Okay, great. Thank you, commissioners. Now we will move on to EPC question number 2. What are the EPC priorities for the streetscape improvements on Moffett Boulevard? We'll go with questions. I'm going to make this fast. Hey, I didn't see in the staff report that you all had like a limitation on we can only do 3 or 4 or so. I'm fine with the way it's presented. That's where I'm starting at. I don't have any questions. Unless the question is, were there limitations? Can we only do a certain number of these? That's the question.
Well, I think the key part for staff to gain from the commission tonight is a priority order. We believe it's likely that you cannot do all of them throughout the precise plan area. And so we don't know yet, because that technical level of analysis has not been performed, how many of them we can include. But getting a priority order to strive to include when we do that level of analysis is the sort of high-level policy feedback we're trying to get from the commission tonight.
Great. So that's useful, very useful to have as information. So having said that, I appreciate that, and now I know where I'm leaning towards. Anyone else? Oh, here we go. Commissioner Nunez, Vice Chair Nunez, sorry about that.
No worries. My priority would be, my priority ranking, I'm only going to go 3. Wider sidewalks, protected bicycle lanes, and the landscape boulevard with medians.
Commissioner Cranston.
Can I ask a question? I thought we were going to have some questions.
We are, but
for the guy in the back, Public Works, that guy. To follow up to Commissioner Pham's question about the right-of-way. Are there any restrictions on what we do on the streetscape across the right-of-way? Because the only place that the Hetchy right-of-way affects this is where it crosses right there at that Middlefield Moffett intersection. Okay, so if we do a streetscape that we say we want to do a particular streetscape in that area, do we have to go to SFPUC to say, I mean, are they going to say, no, you can't put protected bike lanes, or no, you can't put a landscape boulevard in there? How does that work on roads, not parks?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Again, Ed Arango, Assistant Public Works Director, or otherwise known as the guy in the back. Specific to the Hetchy right-of-way, the SFPUC right-of-way, we would need to get permission from the SFPUC in order to do installments across Moffett Boulevard where the Hetchy crosses. Because we do control the right-of-way for street purposes, we have more control into the types of improvements that are consistent with a typical roadway for that portion. So the restrictions such as protected bike lanes, we would have to discuss with the SFPUC on whether those could be hardscape, or it would have to be some temporary improvements in the sense of rubber, plastic, rubber curbs, plastic delineators, or kind of that case. But we're about to broach that topic with the SFPUC with the Moffett Complete Streets project, where we're proposing to put in some protected bike lanes with exactly that, the rubber curbs, the plastic delineators. So we think we can do that. Again, it's within our purview. It's consistent with other streetscape standards that we apply across the roadways.
Thank you. So of the items on here, I like the wider sidewalks and streets. I like the protected bike lanes. Since we're talking about the entire area here, I am not a fan of landscape boulevards with medians, okay? Quite frankly, it's a waste of space. You lose the space that could be used for the protective bike lanes is taken away by the median, okay? There's some areas like Middlefield that are really wide all the way through the city where that works. You might be able to get away with it on Moffett itself, but none of these side streets would make sense to have a landscape boulevard of the medium. So I would rather use that space for the protected bike lanes than put it in the middle of the street where it's not going to be used. And then my only note on on-street parking is, so it came up when we looked at the development at the corner of the old Valero site and at the corner of California and San Antonio. The reason I have a new car is because some freaking Amazon driver was parked out into the street, okay? And if there's no space on any of these streets for people for trucks, Amazon trucks and UPS trucks or whatever to come in and short term, that's going to be a problem because it's going to push them into the traffic lanes, which is dangerous. So I'm not interested in what you think of as on-street parking for everybody, but I do think we have to allow some spots, particularly if it goes as residential, a place for the Amazon truck or the UPS truck or the mailman to pull in, because since the Amici's opened in the Dean in San Antonio, driving along San Antonio going towards Los Altos is dangerous because there's always there, and there's Uber drivers going to Amici's picking up their pizzas. So if we don't allow something in that area for for short-term commercial parking, that's a problem. So I'm not advocating for big on-street parking, but I do think as you're designing your streetscape, you need to allow something for the fact that we're buying stuff online, it's being delivered by trucks and people that just park in the middle of the street, making it dangerous for the rest of it, whether dangerous for a bike, dangerous for cars as well. So that'd be my only caveat on that. We don't need the 4-vehicle travel lanes at all. And I definitely like protected bike lanes better than buffered bike lanes. So that's my comments.
Understood. Thank you. Commissioner Donahue.
So, yeah, I walked up and down that area the other day, and I initially was wondering why it went all the way to the Stevens Creek Trail instead of to just like 85 or something like that, until I walked past there and went across, and then realized, oh, there's no sidewalk. I can't walk back. I have to, and I did know that, but I had kind of just forgotten. Yes, having wider sidewalks, or maybe a sidewalk at all, I think would be good. There were places where I felt that it was impinged by telephone poles. There's a bench for a bus stop and things like that, where having a little bit more space would make it flow better, be more pedestrian friendly. The protected bicycle lanes, I agree, are great. That is something that's not it's not pedestrian friendly, it's not bicycle friendly so much in that area. That would be a great improvement. I am a fan of landscaped boulevard with medians. I know there are portions of Middlefield that have like a 50-foot wide median or something like that. I agree that would be excessive, and certainly here there's not really enough space to do that. But I think having some sort of a landscape median breaks up the urban nature a bit, and softens visually softens it, and makes it more pleasing to be there. If it's a choice between protected bicycle lanes and landscape boulevard, I guess I would take the bicycle lanes. But I think that the two things can coexist. I don't know if the 4 vehicle travel lanes are necessary. I mean, if you don't have 4 travel lanes, I think you could have both the median and the bike lanes. Castro Street used to be 4 lanes before I lived here. And I think that Moffett then is the continuation of that. Now, Castro Street's closed, but Castro Street went down to 2, but Moffett continued to be 4. I think that I don't have the traffic counts or things. I'm sure Public Works would study all of this stuff. But assuming that it's not, a major highway kind of going through there, that the 2 lanes could be sufficient, and then that would allow for the protected bike lane and the landscape median. So I think second the 1, 2, 4 options. Oh, that was you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Pham.
I had a few questions, some of which carry on from the discussion from my colleagues. My first question was to ask staff to provide more detail about the Moffett Complete Streets and Middlefield Road Complete Streets capital projects. We've heard a lot about potential road diet or 4 lanes versus less. Is any of that already considered in these projects, and what's the timeline and scope of these projects?
Thank you for the question. Again, Ed Arango, Assistant Public Works Director and City Engineer. So we have, there's 2 complete street road projects currently active right now. We have the Moffett Complete Streets as well as the Middlefield Complete Streets. Each effectively are a resurfacing project, and they're both federally grant funded through the MTC's One Bay Area grant program that we applied for, and we were successful to get the grants. But let me walk you through each of the Complete Streets components and with the details. So I'll start with the Moffett Boulevard Complete Streets. Again, as I mentioned, it's a resurfacing project, effectively from Middlefield Road to the northerly city limits at the R.T. Jones intersections, which is crossing over 101, entering into the kind of Moffett, NASA area. It's going to install the Class 4 protected bikeways, and then with Class 2 bikeways at those pinch points, there's right-of-way restrictions, and we can only fit so much. We are closing a sidewalk gap on the east side of Moffett between Stevens Creek Trail and Leong. There's currently a sort of a walked dirt pathway that we're gonna improve with the sidewalk. We just recently completed the concept plans for the Moffett Complete Streets, and we're moving now into final design. We went to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and to the Council Transportation Committee. And so now we have direction to move forward. So we're expecting design to complete by the end of 2025 or early 26, and then that would go into construction in early 27. Both, again, as I mentioned, both are federally funded projects. Changing the scope of the project would require us to go through the federal review process again. Considering the climate of federal grants right now, we are very careful on just implementing what got approved. Some community members have echoed their requests for a road diet along Moffett, but again, we consider it a very high risk to go through the federal process again for the grant to introduce new or changed components. We're already hearing this last week about some new information about transportation grants, and they're going to be scrutinized even further. So we're just looking again just to implement what we got the grant for.
I had a follow-up question based on what you said. So would it be right to assume if we were to add landscape boulevards with medians, and that's not already in the scope, that would be difficult to do?
Yeah, again, it'd be very high risk, so staff would not recommend changing the scope of either Complete Street project because they're both federally funded, and there's some pretty significant scrutiny on all federally funded projects and what gets implemented. So we want to just maintain the course with what got approved. Introducing new scope elements is something that we would not recommend.
That's great context.
Okay.
Yeah, and the second part of the question was for the Middlefield Road project.
Yep, I have similar information from Middlefield. Again, predominantly a resurfacing project. We're going from Moffett Boulevard to Ferguson Drive as the resurfacing component. But we're going even further with that with the bikeway component. We're proposing to install Class 4 protected bikeways from Moffett all the way to Bernardo. We have some protected intersection improvements at 4 intersections. So that includes Moffett, Easy Street, Tyrella, and Wisman Road. We are in the concept phase right now. We expect to move into the final design at the end of the summer. And then construction would start trailing the Moffett Complete Streets project in 2027.
I had a different question relating to the Stevens Creek Trail. Can I have a discussion from staff about the existing connections and then any potential future connections, especially for bike and ped?
I can help answer that question as well. So there's actually several connections to the Stevens Street Trail off of Moffett Boulevard. I'll start from the south and work north. East of Moffett Boulevard, at the end of Central Avenue, there's a Stevens Creek Trail connection. On Middlefield Road, also east of Moffett Boulevard, adjacent to the Highway 85 overpass, there's also another Stevens Creek Trail connection. Immediately north of 85, we have Stevens Creek Trail connections on both sides of the road. And then lastly, also kind of north of 85, there's a future connection coming this fall at the 750 Moffett development. This is located on the west side of Moffett, near the intersection with Moffett Boulevard and Leon Drive. There's gonna be a new pedestrian bridge that we installed over Stevens Creek to allow access from Moffett Boulevard through the 750 Moffett Boulevard development across the new bridge to the west side of Stevens Creek to connect to the trail there.
Thank you.
That's it?
Should I talk about some of my priorities?
Sure, why not? Go for it.
So I agree with the other folks here. Wider sidewalks with trees and pedestrian amenities would be really great, especially with its proximity to downtown. And it's obviously what a lot of the community members had voiced in the workshop and outreach, which was great. Definitely agree with protected bike lanes or even buffered bike lanes. Any sort of bike lanes would be helpful. Of course, protected is preferred, but I know that there's space limitations, right-of-way limitations, so I'm not gonna have a favorite between the two. I'm not a fan of landscape boulevards with medians, just because I just don't think there's gonna be enough space. I think it would be a luxury maybe on bigger roads, but in this area, I don't really see it happening. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Pham. Commissioner Yin.
Thank you. I'm excited about streetscape stuff because I think it just allows us as a community to start connecting different places. And if we're connecting the greenways, that is exciting for me. As far as priorities, for sure, pedestrians, wider sidewalks, trees, native plantings. If we have the protected bikeway already, let's just continue it. If it can be, broken up with more greenery, native plantings, or even another alley of trees, even better. Road diet is out, I guess, for Moffett. That is too bad, but maybe something can be done in the future. And I am not that against having some parking, because if you go to the Castro downtown area, you'll see that a lot of people utilize the parking for whatever we want as retail. I mean, constantly. people are, getting into those spots. I don't think I've seen it empty on, high times for sure. It's convenient and it helps the retail. So if it can be done in a way that looks like it kind of is park-like, even better, that's in the design, but I think some parking wouldn't hurt. Honestly, it would help with the economic vitality of the area. But that's where I stand. And just in general, anything to connect the greenery, the nodes of green, this whole area seems very, very much, it already has a sense of park-likeness in a sense. We're going to change it with the density, but I don't want to take it all the way so that it's just San Antonio, another place in Mountain View. I want it to be and have its own identity, which I think is part of the vision. So Stevens Creek Trail is running right along that. If we can maintain access, maintain the connections of green from Stevens Creek Trail onto Moffett, through Middlefield, all of it, and then get to maybe one day the transit center is also an urban park. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
I like your vision. So, I am for wider sidewalks, number one, protected bicycle lanes, number two, and then parking in general. And this is for staff, just to ponder. Quick story. I moved over to California, from Latham to California, and I have to agree. The one thing I've been noticing over and over again, because I used to be at the towers off of across the street from Jack in the Box, so there was no issue there with service vehicles for deliveries, either Lyft, DoorDash, Amazon, FedEx. There's plenty of space there. But when you go into the more congested area neighborhoods, streets like Latham, in between California and Escuela, and Rengstorff, all the way up to over by Target, and the apartment communities or even condo communities, there is no space. I've had a lot of issues with Amazon in particular, and their drivers being parked at the entryway of the driveways that we use to park and place our vehicles for where we live. And we're honking, or people are sometimes even yelling, telling them to move along, right? And when they show up, it gets pretty ugly sometimes because the guys don't get it, right? And I don't know why. You would think. So anything we can do to alleviate that concern, that issue, because it's real for some neighborhoods, more so than others for obvious reasons, we need to work on how we look at parking and also assessing what we can have for that type of vehicle. If there's a way to do a double, where you would have, I've seen this in Mexico, in Mexico City, DF, in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, same thing, and Guadalajara, where they have parking for residents, and during the day for certain hours or throughout, let's say 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., part of that is then reserved for business service vehicles where they can also double park, or they could use that space specifically for that type of delivery. Now, I don't want to add on to what you have to do. I'm just throwing that out there. Take it or leave it, it's up to you. But it was brought up. So that's where we stand. Having said that, it looks like we have a majority in support of wider sidewalks with trees and pedestrian amenities, protected bicycle lanes, and it seems we have 3 people in support of parking in general, one with an emphasis on business delivery vehicle parking, actually 2 with an emphasis on business delivery vehicle parking. And then the others had 1 or 2 supporters, and that would be for the buffered bicycle lanes, which I only heard 1 person, and landscape boulevard with mediums, I heard 2 people. What say you?
That's exactly what I heard.
Awesome, great. So I believe with that, we're done with question number 1 and question number 2. We've just given the summary, and now, if I understand things correctly, we will move on to new business items. 6.1, advisory body input on the fiscal years 2025-26 and 2026-27 council work plan potential projects. So first, we'll have a staff presentation, then questions by the APC, followed by public comment. At the closure of public comment, the commission will then deliberate and take action. Staff presentation from Assistant Community Developer Director Lindsay Hagan. The floor is yours. Lindsay.
My apologies. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Lindsay Hagan, Assistant Community Development Director. I'm here tonight on behalf of the City Manager's Office to talk to the Commission about the upcoming fiscal years 2025 through 2027 Council Work Plan. Specifically tonight to get input on some of the preliminary project ideas to be included in the work plan. For some of the commissioners who may have or who may not be as familiar with our council work plan, essentially our council work plan is a 2-year timeline, a document where council selects a series of projects that are really related to these 7 strategic priorities. These priorities have been in place since roughly 2021, and essentially every project that gets put into the work plan is advancing one or more of these strategic priorities. In terms of how we are approaching the work plan this year with the council's been really clear about wanting to have a slightly different approach from what's been done in the past. Historically, the work plan has been a collaboration between staff and council in selecting projects that go into the work plan. And so what that's meant historically is that we've had somewhere between 40 to 70 projects on these 2-year work cycles. And our abilities to really achieve completion of those projects has been roughly around 50%. We've been very aggressive in our work plans, and they've been quite robust. So this year, kind of looking at a bigger picture, council's been really interested in narrowing down the work plan to a size that feels a lot more achievable, utilizing the resources and capacity that we have in place and available now. And so really the emphasis in this work plan cycle is about quality over quantity of projects. And so really what that means is we're targeting sort of 10 to 14 projects to be on this list. And really, again, the emphasis on projects that are advancing and achieving the strategic priorities, and really trying to approach the work plan from a perspective of sort of projects that help advance other city efforts that are already underway as well, which sort of, and I'll speak to in a moment about how there are existing plans or projects on the work plan. And then really, again, it's about right-sizing what we think we can achieve in a 2-year cycle. And so just to kind of go over this graphic, which is going to be part of the work plan, is this idea of an iceberg. So at the top, you have the strategic priority, in this case, the economic vitality. And from there, you know, there might be a project or two related to advancing economic vitality. So in this case, I'll just pick the economic vitality strategy, which is a project that's on the work plan. And so from there, to actually sort of implement that vitality strategy, it ends up with a bunch of initiatives that we work on. So whether that's a collection of, you know, zoning amendments or online permitting or other things that help us achieve economic vitality, those are sort of a collection of initiatives. And then really everything below the waterline becomes sort of the ongoing services and programs that essentially become embedded in our city organization. And so this is really trying to show this idea that we start with a project, but it really does sort of enlarge to a series of other programs and operational factors that feed into how we operate as a city. So looking at the sort of timeline of how this work plan is developed, it starts with a council subcommittee late last year. They essentially have provided sort of the framework of how we're developing this process or this plan. That process has been sort of accepted by all of council at the meeting in January. And from there, council actually proposed their project ideas. They were given up to a maximum of 3 ideas that they could come forward with. And those ideas could include either existing projects or new project ideas. And the idea behind this is really that the projects on the work plan are really ones that have the highest priority, the highest focus, the highest visibility, and oftentimes the greatest resources. So that's why sometimes, on the list, you'll see existing projects where the idea being council member is interested in having that still be an elevated project in terms of attention and resources. So that's why you're seeing some of these existing projects on the proposal list. So at that February meeting, council discussed all the council members' 3 ideas, and then from there decided what would move on to the phase we're in now, which is essentially a 2-part phase. A group of us, city staff, are going to different advisory bodies and getting input on the project ideas, and again, really trying to get sort of the top 3 picks from each commissioner. And we're tallying that information across all of the advisory bodies, and that will feed into what is shared with council in April. Additionally, at the same time, staff is undergoing our own analysis of these project ideas, sort of identifying what kind of resources, what kind of timing, and other things, which I'll talk more about in a minute as well. So in April, all of this will culminate into a study session where council will actually select the final projects to include on their work plan. And then ultimately the work plan gets adopted with the budget in June. And then the bottom line here just shows that every 6 months, we do provide a report to council, and they can provide any discussion on the progress of these projects. So I sort of touched on this about the staff analysis that's currently underway, but we are looking at, for example, what kind of staff capacity might some of these projects require, what the duration or timing of when we could start or think we could end the project or complete the project. We're also looking at factors like cost of the project, revenue potentially from the project, or this discretionary or non-discretionary, if there's some component of state law that relates to it, for example. Or another example is whether the project might be related to other city efforts underway. And so that's sort of the piece that staff right now, all city departments are really doing that piece right now. And as I mentioned, this will all come together in the April 22nd council study session for them to decide. Just a note to kind of, again, the effort here is just to ask each member to identify the top 3 projects. And so I will tally them as we go. And then last thing I wanted to mention here, so this is the 16 projects that are currently proposed on the work plan. I did receive a series of questions from some commissioners. I do want to just mention that we're at a pretty preliminary stage, so there's not any scoping that's really been done. We're doing that sort of now on these projects. So unfortunately, like detailed questions about the specific elements of these projects, we haven't really gotten to that stage yet, so I may not be able to answer that. However, if it does help the commission, I do have maybe a slightly a sentence or 2 about each one, if that would help or benefit the commission in any way. But with that, I will pass it on to the chair.
Thank you, Lindsay. Much appreciate your help and time. At this point in time, I believe, now I always get this confused, and I don't know why. But I'm thinking at this point in time, we're taking public comment. On the sheet, it doesn't have that, just FYI. So if anyone in attendance would like to provide comments on this item, please fill out a yellow speaker card and provide it to the EPC clerk. If anyone on Zoom would like to provide comment on this item, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Phone users can mute and unmute themselves with *6. Madam Clerk?
No speakers at this time.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. And there's no one here that's willing to opine on that. Board Member Lambert, would you like to opine? Question? No? Okay, great. Thank you for being here, by the way. Mr. President. Okay, let's go on then with EPC questions. Who would like to start? Oh, thank you. Commissioner Donahue.
So the Stevens Creek Trail extension, is that from Dale Heatherstone to the high school, or is what's the extent of that?
You might already stump me on question one. It does definitely start there. I apologize, I don't know the end point, but it is that particular
Past
area.
Dale Heatherstone.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 What's a smart water meter?
Another great question. It's essentially meters that you can, it doesn't require somebody to go up physically and read the meter.
Okay.
You can, it has other devices you can kind of gather data electronically.
Right. Okay. I already have such a water meter, actually, I think. I don't think anybody comes to my, they installed a new meter like 10 years ago or something, so, but maybe that's not citywide, I don't know. Maybe I'm the guinea pig, I don't know.
Just if I could add, it is not currently citywide.
It's not, okay, it's not citywide, but it is in some areas apparently.
And it is a project that staff, it's actually already starting in terms of preparing an RFP to get a vendor to look at options for it. So
Okay.
This is an example of a project where staff is already sort of starting it.
Okay. And I think I know what the other things are. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cranston. Actually, I apologize. Vice Chair Nunez.
My priorities would be 2, 3, and 4.
So no questions? No, okay. Commissioner Cranston.
So one of the things I was confused by is stuff that's in progress but not yet done. Does that go away?
Great question. I meant to cover in my presentation, so I appreciate it. So no, so things that are either on the work plan or even, let's say, existing projects that don't make the cut, they will still be projects that staff are working on. The key difference is the pace at which we work on it. It may get deprioritized, so it won't be worked on as quickly. So that's essentially the difference.
So the fact that items 2 and 3 are already on the work plan, if we don't support those, it doesn't mean they go away. They're still there because, I mean, they're part of the housing element and we have to do them anyway. So I guess that's why I was confused. It's like, why would I vote for something that's already on the plan is what I was trying to rationalize.
Sure, it's essentially that it will get done, more commitment and resources are being put behind it for it to get done within, ideally, this 2-year time span, and there's 2-year cycle.
Okay, and if there's already requirements in the housing element that it has it done in that 2-year time period, how does putting more resources to get it done in that 2-year time period change the fact that it has to be done according to the housing element in that 2-year time period? Why would it be done any more likely to be done because it's already a housing element priority? That's what I'm confused with.
It allows us to deprioritize other work. If it's in the council work plan, that means we're deprioritizing other things that may be on the existing work plan or other work that may be underway. It would be deprioritized to allow for staffing and resources and funding to go towards this.
So if we don't want to deprioritizing that's on the list, can we vote for negative numbers on this, to say no, to vote against what other people are advocating on this new list?
I will take the feedback that you provide and pass it along.
I'm asking because there's a lot of really good projects on the existing project list, and I don't think I have a smart water meter, but would I put it ahead of the Parks and Rec strategic plan? I don't know that I would, and that's why I'm trying to rationalize this list against this list, and I'm not sure how to do that, quite frankly. Help me.
I think another way to think about this is we only have so much staff capacity to do the work that we're trying to do. And so the projects that get placed into this council work plan are ones that will be highly publicized, will have measurable performance tracking done publicly, and will be likely to get more resources, whether that's funding, for consultant help or other things, to ensure that it happens to the greatest effort it can within this 2-year cycle, versus some of the other work that we do where it may just happen at a slower pace, it may take longer to complete that work, and it just may not get the priority or high visibility as those items on the work plan.
Chair, if I may add some additional context. Good evening again, Christian Murdoch, Community Development Director. I think the feedback I want to offer at this point is this is more of an art than a science. I think that's one way to think about this. It's not a formulaic approach, right, to priorities, but will get done and something else won't get done. The other part, like to your concern or inquiry about Project 3, update to R3 zoning standards, there are components of that project that are called for in the housing element, and there are components that are not. And if we didn't prioritize that, for example, as a city, we may deprioritize aspects of that that are not required to be done in the housing element. And the third piece is even those items that have deadlines in the housing element, by and large, those are not mandated deadlines where there's a particular consequence for not meeting the deadline. So while we strive to do that when we want to prioritize and resource those programs to complete them on the specified deadlines in the housing element, there is an ability to deprioritize those programs in the interest of pursuing other work that is higher priority. And the consequences, may be determined later, but there's not a strict consequence in most cases. And so prioritizing something like the R3 does have value, even though aspects of the R3 update are also in the housing element. So I hope that helps frame the issue a little bit more.
Next question. Several of these are in the organizational strength and good governance categories. It kind of gives me the impression like, man, are we messed up? Because all these are like housekeeping things, and it's like, okay, is this the fact that it's listed as a priority? Do they know something that we don't? I don't know how that I would prioritize, amending the city charter over some of these other things, because I don't have any context around it. And I mean, unless you're going to go through those 4 items, but it's like update to council policies, the contracts. I guess I don't perceive that those are really messed up, but the fact that there are 4 of them on here makes me wonder maybe they are really messed up, and I just don't know that they're really messed up, and I should be voting for those. So, can you help me out on those?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Commissioner. I think an important aspect that Mountain View really strives for is what I would sort of label continuous improvement, and I think these are kind of getting at some of that. Some of them are housekeeping-like items in terms of cleaning up the code, for example. A lot of that stuff, I think the example used by the council member whose project idea this was is it's like cleaning out your attic. No one wants to take the time to clean out their attic, but it's something eventually that has to get done. And so, some of this is a bit of that, but I think the other element here too, in terms of like the revenue measure or the city charter amendment, is really about modernizing language that's in the charter, removing outdated provisions, and sort of just generally cleaning it up. For example, there's like a lot of gendered pronouns and other things like that in the charter. And the revenue measure is one, again, really looking at trying to find other revenue streams for the city to provide, the services that we're trying to provide here. So, so those are kind of just a little more context around the items that have been identified for the work plan.
I have an Eichler, I don't have an attic, so I don't have to worry about that, I guess. What the heck is pavement condition index 71? What the heck does that mean?
So it's related to essentially a roadway maintenance kind of standard or threshold of how they speak about roadway maintenance. Right now we're at a pavement index of 67. So to get set to 71, it provides more funding opportunities for the city that we could receive funding for other transportation improvements. And so that's kind of the interest that's driving that project idea is if we were to increase our pavement index, then it gives us more funding opportunities.
Okay. I have to think about this before I give you my rankings.
Great. Commissioner Pham?
I had a few questions, some of which I submitted earlier. So continuing on about PCI, what is the approximate annual paving budget, like millions per year, and what portion of that is funded by general fund?
So I appreciate that question. I think at the end of the day, I won't be able to answer it other than to say, I think it would definitely cost tens of millions of dollars for us to get to the 71 number. And, it would also cost money, therefore, to maintain it at that level. We're talking, tens of millions.
Okay. And I had a question about city charter amendment and revenue measure. What amendments are being proposed, and are amendments needed for the revenue measure? I'm not sure if those two items are connected. And then what would the purpose be for new revenue?
Those are great questions. In terms of the charter amendments, like I said, a lot of it is really about cleanup. In terms of the revenue measure, so the two are not linked inherently. I will say there are some types of revenue measures where they require charter amendments, but at this point there isn't specific scope in terms of what the revenue measure would include or not include. So those details haven't been fleshed out. It's really about whether the city wants to put resources behind pursuing a revenue measure, which is quite resource intense to do.
And I think there may be some economies in many cases to having more than one local measure on a particular ballot. And so if the city were to consider one and not the other, there may be a missed opportunity to lower the overall cost of having two items together.
Okay, thanks. A few more questions related to the smart meters. Do you happen to know the percentage of water meters already converted to smart meters?
Unfortunately, that would be a question I wouldn't know the answer to.
No worries. What about number of meter readers employed by the city?
Again, I'm sorry, don't know the answer to that question.
No worries. Last question. Would this item include water smart software, like a smart aspect of using the meters that residents or businesses could kind of see how their use is compared to others?
Yes, so it would include the software aspect where people can track data and also detect leaking.
Okay. Next question is about the Stevens Creek Trail. Funding, what are the agreements being proposed? Like, who are they with and what are the terms?
So the terms, the agreements haven't been, started yet, so the terms haven't been identified. But in terms of the parties, it would be with the city of Sunnyvale primarily, and then I believe there may be a component of grant funding from, I believe, the VTA.
Last question is related to the natural gas phase out. What's been done with that item so far, and are there known regulatory hurdles, and what are some other neighboring cities doing on that?
It's a great question. I think with the lawsuit that came out of the city of Berkeley, the city did have to suspend our prohibition on natural gas appliances in new construction. So there is definitely a legal framework here in terms of things that we have to consider with this type of project. In terms of other cities, there isn't really other cities that have formally taken action on something to this scale. But I would say cities like the city of Berkeley are looking at this area as well. But we don't really have any kind of prototype to point to, for example.
All right, thanks for humoring my questions.
Commissioner Yen?
Yes, a couple of questions have already been answered, so I think I only have one more, and that was there are several organizational strength and good governance items. I was curious if by doing these, this would then make other tasks much easier, and if staff had like one in mind. I don't want you to, I don't mean to put you on the spot to speak for all of staff, but if there was one that stood out as this one would make everyone's life easier and things would just go smoother for all the projects across the board, let me know. Which one would that be?
Appreciate the question. I think, I'll be honest, staff's really trying not to be involved in providing, in this work plan in the way we have been in the past. Mm-hmm. But I would say really any of the measures you see on there in terms of the code cleanup or the other example, the design standards or other things, I mean, really at the end of the day, a lot of those things can streamline and can improve things for city staff and the community. So I think, there's a lot of upsides to these projects.
And in your analogy, I'm going to just continue with it for the attic cleaning. The things in the charter are those things that need to be cleaned up. These are things that are just like slightly in the way and annoying, or is it something that's going to be transformational?
Great question. I think, again, not having dived deep into what that scope might entail, I will say some of the examples that have been highlighted, particularly from the council member who proposed the project, are things that you could categorize as maybe annoying in your description, like the gendered pronouns and just things like that, but or maybe just not in modern day spirit. But there are things that I think you could also classify as just being unnecessary. A great example is our city charter requires the council members to read the entire resolution or ordinance title into the records. So sometimes with these really big projects, it takes a council member, 3 minutes to read all those resolution titles and all those ordinances into the record. That would just be an example of maybe streamlining things or maybe, modernizing something. But yeah, I wouldn't say anything identified as part of that project so far has necessarily been earth-shatteringly different.
Okay, that would help other projects go faster or anything. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Donahue.
I noticed that a lot of the things actually fit into multiple strategic priorities, like the Stevens Creek Trail thing is mobility and connectivity, but it's also livability and quality of life because it's more of a recreational amenity. And things like the city charter thing or municipal code is good governance, but it's also maybe community for all if it removes the is more gender inclusive. But I appreciate that you have to choose, if you have one category, you just kind of pick one. From my perspective, I guess now I'll get into more of my opinion here. I think that I appreciate things like cleaning up the municipal code. That's kind of not a really exciting thing that people are really going to say, oh boy, we finished that project. But it is a good thing to get done, but it's not going to make my top 3. And I feel that way about actually a lot of these things. They're really great ideas, and I would hope that because there are 10 projects that are, or 10 to 14, I think, that are actually going to get through, I hope that more than just the 3 that I'll choose will get through. That being said, things that pop out to me actually are the Stevens Creek Trail extension. I guess I cut my teeth in the Parks and Recreation Commission, which in the city charter is called the Recreation and Parks Commission, so maybe that would be one of the things that we could clean up. But I think, as I said, it's a recreational thing. It's a mobility thing. It connects the city. It makes it more livable. So that would be one of my 3 things. I think that facilitating low and moderate income home ownership, including addressing the second thing, I think is another important thing. It's often brought up, and I think that addressing it would be important. As for my third thing, I think I'm probably going to go with updating the R3 zoning standards. It is kind of already required, so to Commissioner Kranz's point, but I think that that's an important thing to get over the finish line.
Commissioner Cranston.
So, question for staff on number 12. Is it more than just a pretty storefront thing, or is it also programs that would actually encourage the owners to actually get them leased and not just flowers in the window? Because if it was something that was not just, while it's vacant, it's pretty, but also, I mentioned earlier the $6,000 a year penalty that is being paid by landlords in San Francisco. It helped me to add more space. Okay, it was a contributing factor in the landlord allowing me to add space. So if this went beyond just a pretty display, that would mean more to me than just purely pretty windows. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so this project idea is around not just a pretty window display, but also pop-up opportunities for pop-up events or pop-up, retail or other uses. That's a big component of that idea.
Is there a component that would help encourage landlords to actually lease the spaces as well, or is that not part of the project?
I mean, again, I think part of what we're sort of scoping right now is the details of it. But really the idea was to try and activate these spaces, not just leaving them vacant. And I don't know if...
I'll add on, and I'll just say there are different ways to conceive of this, and we need to work with council to shape out the scope and level of effort that they want to see. But there's very much a landlord incentive component that needs to complement the storefront beautification and activation component, because ultimately it requires landlord consent to do that. And so we don't have a program if we don't have landlords willing to participate for the most part. And so it could and perhaps should be, but we don't know yet because we haven't taken this to council to get their full views on the prioritization and extent of the work.
Okay, so my 3 will be that one, number 12, because I think downtown's very important. I'm not convinced that we're doing enough even within the housing I'm on streamlining design standards. So I think number 10 is something that would be very beneficial to the city to help people get through the process and free up staff's time to focus on the next project. Sorry guys, I live about as far from Stevens Creek as anybody can possibly live in the city of Mountain View, so it's not getting my vote. Okay. Sorry about that. But I would do R3 as my third one. So number 3, number 10, and number 12.
Commissioner Yin.
These are all worthy, and it was tough. But for connectivity that I've been pushing for so long, I'm going with number 1. Counter. And I think there's also a funding element there too, that a timing thing. So I'm going to push for that. Number 10, I think that benefits everyone: the city, the developers, the landowners, staff, us, all the way around. I think design standards, I know it would be a new project and you have to flesh it out, but I don't know any other city, well, I take that back. Every city I've worked with in my profession has design standards for some aspect of their city, and I don't know that we have it, so it would help. And I know developers who also would agree. If we know more ahead, it would help us tremendously, so yay on all ports. And then number 12, I'm going to also add that in because downtown is the heart of the city, and I hear a lot of complaints, as active as it is, like, why do we have so many vacancies? Why is it like blacked out or whatever? I just think that that would be a simple thing potentially if we have the resources and the ability to get the owners to get on board. It would be fairly simple, I think, and quick. And if it can't be done, you find out it can't be done, then it's gone.
Commissioner Pham.
So I want to start with a comment on the process. I think it's great that staff are going to all the commissions. That's not something I've seen in all the cities I've worked on, so that's humbling that council would trust in us and staff would trust in us to give comments on these priorities, which is great. Also, I want to say that being a staff member in other agencies working on council priorities, it was a joy. It feels great to be able to work on a council priority, but it's almost like a double-edged sword with additional resources and visibility. There's also, I don't want to say scrutiny, but additional focus to make sure things move forward. So there's good and bad in that. And so I overall appreciate the approach that has been taken to prioritize quality over quantity. Having more than 70 or so council priorities is really hard on staff. So it's great that we have a small focused list. That being said, it's so hard to choose 3 because I have worked on similar council priorities, and I know of colleagues who have worked on a lot of these, and a lot of these have merit. So I'll get to the 3 that I feel like I want to point out. I'm in support of number 1, funding agreements and engineering for Stevens Creek Trail Extension. I think that this is great for the trail, for mobility and connectivity. Also, I know that Sunnyvale is, at least their council is in support of this project, and having worked on engineering projects, I know that some visibility could help moving things forward, especially with so many partners having to work together on such a huge project through planning, engineering, design, and construction. So I think I hope that a lot can be done in 2 years, but I understand that such a project may take longer, so I want to have it on the priority list so it moves forward. The second one I want to highlight, I really want to just highlight 2, 4, and 10 at the same time, especially being part of this commission. I feel like they're all somewhat related, but I won't be able to because we're limited to 3, but all of them are so important, and they all support Mountain View to be able to densify in a smart way. So I want to choose them all, but I can't. So I guess if I had to choose one of the 3, I would want to highlight the design standards, so that's number 10, as it'll help, improve development, but provide also clarity to developers. So that was really hard, since all three are really, really great ones. The last one I want to highlight is number 8, placing an amendment to the city charter and revenue measure. I like that it's exploring, may not result in a revenue measure, but I think a lot of the other projects on here, not all of them, or a lot of them are planned, and I think about the iceberg figure that you showed. Plans are great, but if they result in 80 recommendations that the city never have the money to implement all of them, that's a shame. So we end up with plans on the shelf that don't go anywhere. And so I think revenue measure or exploring revenue sources may be a good way to get some of those smaller recommendations from previous plans actually completed. So those are my 3.
Thank you, Commissioner. Hey, Alex, quick question. What were your 3? 2, 3, and 4. Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Nunez. I appreciate that very much. So we're close. Questions I have. Do you think it would be possible for us to, in the future, whether we're here or another set of people are here, when we have potential projects, it'd be nice to have something that goes with it that was spoken about beforehand, which was, where are we at with this particular idea? So that we then could have a frame of reference for where things stand. And then maybe we can have better clarification of what type of questions we can submit ahead of time based on that, so that then we can have a discussion with more informed knowledge as best as you can provide, so that we can then move forward with the discussion more deliberately. What say you?
That's definitely feedback I can
Awesome.
carry back.
Great. So thank you very much for that. And I appreciate your help and time with all this. I also appreciate the council ask us for our opinion. We're not into policy. We're not at that level. We're EPC. We deal with land use and other things that relate to zoning. So just to get this perspective from us is appreciated. So I'll just be quick. I like 8, 10, and then 2. The reason is for 8, we can't count on the feds. It's too uncertain. We need to count on ourselves. And if we can help each other out to raise money to do things that we need for the city, this is the time that we do it. The less we rely on them for now, the better we'll be in the future. We can figure out our own budgets, we can figure out our own priorities, and we can get things done. We've done it in the past, and we can do it forward as well. Simple. 10, it's about time. We need this to move forward with our plans, and for the outside community with the developers to understand what are the goals. If you don't have this, then things sometimes fall through the wayside. And then you have developer remedy projects that are in limbo for like 2 to 3 years, and then they come to the city, and then they don't get the answer that they want, and then they're eligible for a developer remedy project, and then that happens. And in the meantime, we lost opportunity there. So let's establish the design standards so that we can have improved project developments. And then number 2, we always talk about this opportunity to have a more inclusive, socioeconomic diverse group of people living in Mountain View. We all know that a lot of these places, for the most part, are socially and racially segregated for whatever reason because of bad planning in general. Back then, we didn't have the perspective that we had now. We looked at the Constitution from a different perspective, and therefore city governance was affected by that. There's a lot of studies that have come through the Cal Berkeley and the Ethics Studies program that have laid the foundation for what type of policies were developed back then that affect us now. We all know those things to be true. But to develop a strategy to facilitate low and moderate income home ownership, I'd like us to be able to stand tall and move forward with that type of idea, because it's those ideas that are often mentioned in the campaign trail and they're hardly ever followed up on. So I want us to be held accountable at that level and here in general to make things happen. So if we're gonna look for revenue and we're gonna look for the design improvement for development, and if we're gonna do this facilitation of low and moderate income home ownership, we cover a lot of bases for quality of life, equity, inclusion, and the type of community that we all want to feel a part of, to be proud, and also to be humble about it. So that's my 2 cents worth on that front. I think with that, you've got the majority perspective on what we all opted for. I don't know that there's an actual majority but you have a pretty clear sense of what our top 3 priorities are. I saw 2 get 3 votes, 10 get 3 votes. Yes.
I'm not sure, but staff can jump in. I don't know that we need a majority for this particular activity.
Right. Yeah. No, and I'm just confirming because based on here, it says chair to provide or ask staff for a summary of EPC direction received for the record. So I was just going to say what I had mentioned up to this point, and if you have any difference of opinion or what have you, by all means, chime in.
The track you were on and reading. So I got 3 votes for number 1, 3 for number 2, 3 for number 3, 1 for number 4, 2 for number 8, 4 for number 10, and 2 for number 12.
Great. So I think at this point in time, staff, I think we're set.
Yep.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Let's move on to number 7, the commission staff announcements, updates, requests, and committee reports. And as a reminder, no action will be taken on any questions raised by the commission at this time. Okay. Well, Diana.
Yeah, thank you, Diana Pancholi, Principal Planner with the City's Planning Division. The only announcement I had is we are going to cancel the April 2nd EPC meeting because we don't have any item on the agenda.
Can you make one? Thank you for that. And so having said that, it is my pleasure to announce that the meeting is adjourned at 10:04 p.m. Thank you all.